안녕하십니까 여러분. 저는 오늘 행사 사회를
Good
맡은
afternoon,
서울시
ladies and
아나운서
gentlemen. My name is
서지영입니다.
AhYeon, the
반갑습니다.
Seoul City announcer. I'll be your host today.
오늘 이 자리는 지난 3월
Today
열린
marks the
제1차
second
포럼
forum
서울이
following the
묻고
first
세계가
one held
답하다에
in
이어서
March,
마련된
titled
두
Seoul
번째
Asks, the World
장입니다.
Answers.
이번에는 시민 여러분이
This
직접 던진
time we have
질문에
prepared a
총괄
public
건축가
dialogue where
파트너스가
the city
답하는
architect partners
공론의
will
장으로 준비를
directly answer
했습니다.
the questions
오늘의 대화는
submitted by
단순히
citizens.
현재 도시의 과제를
Today's
살펴보는 것을
discussions goes
넘어서
beyond simply looking
서울이
at the
앞으로의
current
100년을
challenges.
준비하기 위해
It is
어떤
about
비전과
considering the
또
vision and
전략을 세워야
strategy Seoul
할지
must
함께
set
고민하는
for
자리이기도
the
합니다.
next 100 years.
이 자리가 서울의 미래를 위한
I hope this becomes a
구체적이고
meaningful time where
실천적인
we work
해법을
together with
시민들과 함께
citizens
찾아가는
to
의미 있는
find concrete
시간이 되기를
and practical solutions for Seoul's future.
우선 오늘 행사 시스템을
Let me
간단하게
briefly introduce
안내해드리겠습니다.
today's program.
먼저
The
포럼은
forum will be
개회식
divided
1부와
into
또 2부로
the opening
나뉘는데요.
ceremony, part 1 and
개회식에서는
part 2.
참석자 소개와
The opening
환영
ceremony
인사,
will include
그리고
introductions, a welcome
예정되어
address,
있고요.
and congratulatory
일부에서는
remarks.
자연,
In
사람,
part 1, under the
지능을
themes
주제로
of nature,
시민이
human,
질문을
and
하면
humanities,
총괄 건축가
citizens will ask
파트너스들이
questions and
서울의
city architect partners will
해주실
provide
예정입니다.
Seoul's answers.
1부가 끝나고 10분
After
동안
part 1, we
잠시
will
휴식
have
시간을
a
가진
10-minute
뒤에
break.
4시부터
And then
포럼이
at 4
시작돼서
o'clock,
종합
part
토론을
2 will
진행할
begin
예정입니다.
with a comprehensive
그에
roundtable
앞서서
discussion.
오늘 자리를 빛내주신
Now, I'd first
대빈분들을
like to introduce our
소개해드릴까
distinguished
하는데요.
guests.
제가 호명드리는
As I call your
분들은
names,
자리에서
please stand
일어나셔서
and
인사해
greet
주시기
the
부탁드립니다.
audience.
먼저
First,
서울특별시의회
Chairman Kim
주택공간위원회
Tae-soo of the Seoul Metropolitan
김태수
Council's
위원장님
Housing and Space
참석해
Committee.
주셨습니다. 여러분 큰 박수 부탁드립니다.
Please welcome him.
이어서 서울시 총괄
Next,
건축가
Professor Kang
강병근 교수님
Byung-gun,
함께해
Seoul's
주셨습니다.
city
여러분 박수로
architect.
맞아주십시오. 그리고 서울시 총괄 공공
And
디자이너 김주연님
Kim
함께해
Ji-yeon,
주셨습니다.
the Chief Public
여러분 박수로
Designer of
맞아주십시오.
Seoul City.
이어서 이번 포럼에서
Now I'd like to
연사로 참석을
introduce the
해주시는
city
총괄 건축가
architect partners who will be
소개
speaking today.
올리겠습니다. 모르시는 분들이 있을 것 같아서
For those who are
제가
unfamiliar,
총괄 건축가
the city
파트너스에
architect
대해서
partners
살짝
are
설명을 해드리자면요.
a
총괄
council
건축가
of
파트너스는
renowned experts
도시,
in urbanism,
건축,
architecture,
지속
design,
가능성,
sustainability,
각
and
분야별
landscape,
저명한 국내외 전문가로 구성된
both
전문가
domestic
협의체입니다.
and international.
서울도시 건축 혁신
They
분야의
play a
주요
key role
이슈를
in discussing
심도
major
있게
issues
논의하고
of Seoul's
미래 서울의
urban and
중장기적
architectural
발전
innovation
방향과 또
and in
청사진을
presenting mid to
제시하는
long-term
역할을
visions
맡고
and
있습니다.
blueprints for the city's
먼저
future.
국내 파트너스분들을
First, our
소개하겠습니다.
domestic partners.
한양대학교 구자훈 교수님입니다.
Professor Jahoon
여러분
from
큰
Hanyang
박수
University.
부탁드립니다. 서울대학교 맹필수
Professor Meng
교수님입니다.
Pil-soo
여러분
from
박수로
Seoul National
맞아주십시오.
University.
홍익대학교 오홍성 교수님입니다.
Professor Oh Sung from Hongik
여러분 큰
University.
박수 부탁드립니다. 서울대학교
Professor
존
John
홍
Hong
교수님입니다.
from Seoul
여러분
National
박수로
University.
맞아주십시오. 특별 초청으로
And we have specially invited
서울시립대학교
Professor
김아현
Kim
교수님
Ah-yeon
자리해
from the
주셨습니다.
University
여러분
of Seoul.
큰 박수 부탁드립니다. 다음으로는
Now I'd like to
멀리
introduce the
해외에서
international
와주신
partners
해외
who've traveled
파트너스분들을
from afar.
소개하겠습니다. 제이마이어 H,
Mr.
뮤르겐 마이어님입니다.
Jürgen Meyer of J. Meyer
네,
H.
여러분 큰 박수 부탁드립니다. 헤더윅 스튜디오의
Mr. Thomas Heatherwick
헤더윅님입니다.
of Heatherwick Studio.
또한 도미니크 페로 아키텍처,
Additionally,
도미니크 페로와
we have
UN
Mr. Dominique
스튜디오
Perrault from
벤반
Dominique
베르케,
Perrault
필드
Architecture, Ben
오퍼레이션
van
제일
Berkel from UN
총괄은
Studio, and James
일정상
Corner from Field
협상 참석이
Operations,
어려운 관계로
who will join us via
영상으로
video
참석해
due
주실
to
예정입니다.
their
또 귀한
schedules.
시간을
We
내주셔서
sincerely thank
참석해
all of
주신
you for
모든
being here
분들께
today with
감사의
us.
말씀을 드립니다. 이어서 오세훈
Next,
서울시장님의
we have a video
영상
welcome
환영
message
인사가
from the Seoul City Mayor, Mr. Oh Se-hoon. Please welcome him with a round of applause.
여러분 반갑습니다. 서울시장 오세훈입니다.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm the Mayor of Seoul, AhYeon. I am very happy to welcome architects from around the world and the citizens of Seoul at this forum today. The theme of today's forum is Nexus Seoul Next 100. Citizens ask, Seoul answers. The key question is how to design buildings in Seoul for the next 100 years. When we know that in fashion, it's hard to even predict the next coming trend, when we hear 100 years, it seems kind of impossible to predict so far ahead. But some values are timeless. Quality of life and daily living are these values. They never go in or out of fashion. Seoul has experienced rapid growth during the past century, but now it must move beyond quantitative growth and tackle ways to ensure quality of life for its citizens to become a first-class city. This is why we have developed a 100-year urban space master plan for Seoul, beginning 2 years ago, and we are asking experts and citizens to give us their valuable feedback. Today's forum will focus on 3 topics. The first one is nature. Seoul's greatest asset is the Han River and its streams, its mountains and its forests. Regenerating and living with nature will make Seoul more competitive in the future. The second topic is human. Citizens are the true owners of the city. Convenient pedestrian roads, accessible care and culture, welcoming living spaces are what we need in our cities. The third topic is Humanience. Technology and data will make our city safer. But we must also remember that technology is not a goal, but a tool for the citizens. Rather than big buildings, ensuring the quality of life of its citizens will shape Seoul's future. Nature becomes the protagonist. Humans are at the center. Technology and intelligence are supporters. This is the Seoul we want to create in 100 years. Your questions will be the blueprint for the city, and today's forum will be writing the first page of this blueprint. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mayor 오세훈. Thank you for your kind words. Now, we invite a congratulatory address from Chairman Kim Tae-soo of the Housing and Space Committee of Seoul City Council. Please welcome him with a warm round of applause. I thought we would have a large turnout, but I don't think we see that many citizens of Seoul. But, however, we do have a full house. The citizens will ask questions, and the Seoul City will provide answers. So it's a great honor to be here with the distinguished citizens of Seoul. My name is Kim Tae-soo, Chairman of this Housing and Space Committee of the City Council. What do you think about when we talk about housing and space? Seoul citizens are not that aware of what our committee does. We are in charge of digital policies and residential spaces and reconstruction and rebuilding of Seoul City, and we also run the SH Corporation, Seoul Housing Corporation. So we're a very busy organization. However, I think the council members, the council chairman should have been here, but instead of Mr. Che, I have the honor of delivering the congratulatory remark. It's a great honor. Distinguished guests from home and abroad and Seoul citizens who are watching this forum on YouTube, thank you very much. We're putting our heads together with the citizens and architects to envision the future 100 years of Seoul. Right now, we are living in an age of artificial intelligence. We have self-driving cars who reach destinations without human intervention, and we are able to communicate with the world real-time with many smart devices. AI is used in many facets of our everyday lives. This is the future that were themes of the past sci-fi movies. In the future, Seoul City will be changing rapidly, more rapidly than the past 100 years. So we've designated Nexus Seoul, the next 100 years, as a blueprint for our citizens who will be living in the city of the future. We want a city with a high quality of life and a Nexus city that is interconnected with cities around the world. This is the strategy that we must focus on. The 100-year plan cannot be established overnight, but we can approach it in phases. That will allow us to continue to grow and develop even after 100 years. I'd like to thank Mayor Oh Se-un for providing us with this opportunity. And I'd like to thank the city architect, as well as Jahoon, Jahoon, Ming-Pil-Soo, John Hong, who are professors of architecture, and Jürgen and Thomas Heatherwick for being here with us today. Thank you very much.
부탁드립니다.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, let's give Mr. Kim a big hand.
김태수 위원장님의 말씀처럼 오늘의
As
자리가
mentioned by
서울의
our council
100년
member,
미래를
we are here to talk about
준비하는 조금 더 의미
the future
있는
of Seoul in
공론의
100
자리가 되길
years,
바랍니다.
and we hope that we will
이어서
all
참석해
have
주신
very
내빈분들이
productive
함께
discussions.
기념사진을
We are now
촬영해 볼
going to take
텐데요.
a group
호명드리는
picture.
분들은 앞으로
When I call your
나와주시기
name,
바랍니다.
please come up to the stage.
김태수 위원장님과 총괄
Our council
건축가님,
member, Kim
총괄
Tae-soo,
공공
Seoul
디자이너님,
City
총괄 건축가
Architect,
파트너스
Future
분들은
Urban
모두 무대
Space
위로
Planning
올라와 주시기
Director,
바랍니다.
and all of our partners, could you please come up on stage for the picture taking?
네, 사진 촬영 진행하겠습니다.
We will now take the picture.
네, 사진 촬영 한 번 더 해보겠습니다.
Once
오른손으로
again,
파이팅
could you raise your
외쳐보겠습니다.
right hand and say fighting?
파이팅! 네, 감사합니다. 네, 이제 일부를 시작하기에 앞서서
Before we
다시
begin
한번
part
리시버
1 of our
사용법에 대해서
forum,
안내해
I
드리겠습니다.
would like to
1번 채널은 한국어 채널이고요. 2번 채널은
give you some
영어입니다.
information about our interpretation
그럼
channel.
본격적으로
Channel 1 is
일부 포럼을
Korean and channel 2 is
시작하겠습니다.
English. We will now start part 1 of
일부에서는
our forum.
시민이 질문을
In
하고
part 1 of our forum,
총괄
the
건축가
citizens
파트너스
will
분들이
ask questions
답변을 하는
and
형식으로
our
진행이 될
partners
텐데요.
will be answering.
총괄 건축가 파트너스 분들은 시민의 질문에
And
어떤 답변들을 준비해
we look
오셨을지
forward to the
기대가
different
됩니다.
answers our
파트너스
partners have
분들은 이번
prepared
포럼의
to our
주제인
citizens'
자연,
questions. And
사람,
they get to
지능,
choose between
이
the
세 개의
three
핵심 키워드
topics,
중
nature,
한 가지를
human, and
선택해서
humanience,
답변을 해
and they
주실
will answer
예정입니다.
on one of these subjects.
첫 번째 세션, 자연입니다.
The first
자연에 대한
session
시민들의
is
질문을
nature.
지금 영상으로 바로
We will hear
만나보시겠습니다.
these questions through a video. Let's watch.
안녕하세요. 저는 서울 강남구에 거주하고 있는
Hello, I live in
공소
Gangnam
이태입니다.
and I work in
탄소흡수
an
도시가 되기
architecture
위해
studio.
목구조 건축의 역할이 매우
I
중요하다고
think timber
생각합니다.
can play a key role
동대문
in
서울시
building
도서관처럼
carbon-absorbing
목구조를 활용한 설계
cities.
공모가 더 많이
What if there
된다면
were more
어떨까요?
design competitions calling for
또는
timber
목구조를
construction
전문으로
like the
교육하는
Dongdaemun
국가
Municipal
교육기관이 생긴다면
Municipal
어떨까요?
Library Project? What if there was a
우리나라
national
사람들이
school
가장 많이
teaching
살고 있는
timber
아파트에
construction?
목구조를 도입하려면
What about
어떠한
using
노력이
timber when
필요할까요?
building apartments where most
이외에도
Koreans live?
탄소흡수 도시가 되기
I would
위해
like
전
to know
세계에서 하고
what
있는
some
다양한
global
시도에
cities
대해
are
함께
doing to
이야기해보고
develop
싶습니다.
carbon-absorbing cities.
안녕하세요. 저는 고양시에서
Hello,
성동구로
I
출근하며
commute from
건축 설계를 하고
Goyang
있는
to
오하늘입니다.
Songdong-gu. I'm Oh-haneul. I'm an
서울이 더욱
architect.
아름다운 도시가 되기
I
위해
hope
시민들이
that
출퇴근길과 일상
Citizens can
도처에서
experience
자연을
nature
더 많이
more in
경험할
their
수 있으면
commutes and daily
좋겠습니다.
lives in Seoul.
안타깝게도 지금까지의
Unfortunately, many
근린공원이나
neighborhood parks
유흥공간은
and unused
오래탄 포장된
spaces in Seoul
놀이터이거나
are just
앉을
old
곳 없는 보도블럭
paved
섬에 불과한 곳이
playgrounds or
많은데요.
pedestrian islands without
찾아가야만
places
하는
to sit.
대공원뿐 아니라
Can we
가까운
rethink and
소공간들을
redesign
잘
these spaces
계획한
as
녹지로
green
재정비할 수
areas
있을까요?
so we don't have to go
또
to big
차도가
parks that are
우선시된
very far
기존의
away?
인프라 계획에서
Can we also change
도로와
our
자전거 도로의
infrastructure,
영역을
which
존중하는
often
계획으로
gives priority
전환시켜
to roads,
이런 녹지
into one
공간들을
that
연결해 줄
focuses
수
more on
있을까요?
pedestrians and bicycles and connect them with these green pockets?
안녕하십니까. 서울시 공공건축가
Hello,
양근보라고
I'm
합니다.
Yang Geun-bo. I'm a
서울
public
녹지
architect
국도에
in
대해서
Seoul.
질문하고자
I
합니다.
would like to ask about the
서울은
goal
도심
of
진의
achieving
국토공유 비율이
100% green
매우
spaces in Seoul.
서울
Since
녹지
we do not
100%
have a lot of
달성을
public land
민간
in Seoul,
참여가 매우
private
중요하다고
participation, I think, is
민간의
crucial.
적극적인 참여를
Could you
유도하기 위한
elaborate on the
서울시의
specific
특별한
policies and
정책적 방향성에
incentives the
대해서
city is
설명
considering
부탁드립니다.
to activate
그리고
private
개인적으로는
engagement?
전국 일조보다는
Personally, I
정남
believe
일조가
that
친환경
north-facing
전략을
sunlight
난방향에 적용할 수
access
있어서 더 효용성이
that
높다고
south-facing
생각합니다.
sunlight access is
이에
more
대한
effective
의견도
than
듣고
applying
싶습니다.
north-facing sunlight access in applying eco-friendly strategies.
안녕하세요.
I would like to
서울시에
hear your thoughts
질문합니다.
on this.
서울의 녹지 공간 확대와 효율적인
Hello.
토지 이용을 위해서는 올해
I
발표한
think
이태공원이 중요한
that the
역할을
newly
할 것
announced
같습니다.
vertical parks will play a key role in expanding green spaces and efficient land use. What will change once vertical parks are implemented in Seoul? And what do we need to do to activate these vertical
도움을
parks?
살고 있는 학생입니다.
Hello, I'm a student living in Nowon-gu. Can urban green spaces be not just landscapes but become eco-hubs for biodiversity, for birds, insects and plants? What sites will we need to expand? Forests, and how should they be managed? And what impact will citizen engagement and educational programs have on biodiversity? I'm 30 and I live in Gangseogu. We always say that this summer is going to be the coolest, but it never happens, and summer is getting hotter and hotter every year, making the summers unbearable. Not to mention there is frequent rain that creates flood damages, yet green spaces in the city remain fragmented and the wind corridors are blocked by the very tall buildings. I think we need to shift from simple landscaping to create an ecological network connecting green spaces and redesign the city's infrastructure to store and absorb stormwater. Is this possible, and how can we do it?
네, 자연에 대한 시민들의
Yes,
다양한
those were
질문이
various
있었습니다.
questions posed by the
먼저
citizens
필드
regarding the
오퍼레이션의
theme
제임스
nature.
프로님께서
Mr. James Corner from Field
영상으로
Operations
답변해
will be
주시겠습니다.
answering on
함께 보시죠.
nature through a video message.
Hello, I'm James Corner speaking to you from New York. It's again a great honor and a great pleasure to be part of this forum in Seoul. I think I'd like to say at the beginning that your three topics here, nature, human, and technology, all three should be considered together as a synthesis. It's not like we can think about nature in isolation, or humans in the city in isolation, or technology in isolation. But all three need to be understood and spoken about together. My topic is specifically nature within that triad. I think it's worth noting that it's only very recently that cities have invited nature back into their territory. Landscape come into the city as a big body of functioning nature to improve water quality, to improve air quality, to improve the resiliency, the functional resilience of the city and its biodiversity, as well as to provide beauty and delight for the city residents. The line of questions here really has to do with accessibility to nature. How do citizens and residents have access to parks and green spaces? Is it possible to have a 10-minute or a 15-minute city where you're literally able to walk from wherever you are into a generous green space? London is a really good example. It's a city that is peppered with small gardens and small parks and small pocket spaces, lots of in-between spaces that offer social amenity and beauty. So this idea of peppering as in a kind of a mosaic of green opportunities, but also the virtue of a green ring. London, as you know, has a significant green belt around it, which helps to protect and contain the city and prevent sprawl. So both peppering and ringing are parts of a strategy towards offering more green space that's readily accessible for people. And a second question along these lines has to do with integrating transportation corridors with green space. This is something that we have been doing in Miami with the Underline, which is an elevated transit corridor with very derelict and abandoned and underutilized space beneath. We've been working with the city of Miami to create that as one new, very long green corridor. A green corridor that facilitates not only walking, but also cycling and jogging and exercise, as well as community programs like play and fitness. So yes, why not do a lot more to integrate all transportation corridors with green space that offer long linear trails for people to exercise, for people to move, and for people to interconnect. A second question along these lines concerns urban forests and biodiversity. One thing that is an interesting statistic is London is considered one of the world's largest forests. More than 1/5 of the land area of London is tree canopy. Most of these trees are in streets, in passageways, in small gardens and small parks. But when you do an aerial survey of the canopy, it is almost a totally interconnected canopy that occupies over 22% of the land area. Urban forests are absolutely key to the health and vitality of the city. Forests, of course, provide shade. They help with transpiration to evaporate stormwater. They significantly enhance biodiversity, and they bring a great deal of beauty and delight for citizens. And the final set of questions on my card here has to do with climate. Is it possible that bringing nature into the city, working with natural systems and with landscape in the context of the city can help with climate change? Well, obviously, yes. The more trees you're able to have in the city, the more shade, the lower the temperatures, the adjustment of local microclimates as you walk from one space to the next. You can enjoy dappled light and shade and light, but also in a protective sequence of microclimates. You are probably familiar with the idea of sponge cities, that is integrating very soft landscapes into the urban fabric that can absorb water very easily, store water, prevent it from getting into streams and creating flooding, and also improving water quality over time and adding to the overall biodiversity and health of the overall ecosystem. So to conclude, I cannot stress the importance of doing a lot better with integrating natural systems into the city, with beginning to understand natural systems as green infrastructure that is worth the investment, because the investment allows these landscapes to do work. They perform. They add value, not only scenically and in terms of beauty and amenity, but also in terms of helping reduce temperatures in the city, helping work with stormwater, enhancing biodiversity, and of course, improving the lives and the spirit and the soul of everyday residents. I hope this very short, sharp discussion helps to answer some of the questions and put a focus, a correct focus on the importance of nature in the contemporary city. Thank you.
네, 제임스 코너님.
Thank you, Mr. James Corner. Next, I would like to invite Professor Kim AhYeon from the University of Seoul to talk about urban practices for ecological transition. Let's give her a big hand. I think I received a question on biodiversity, and what you see here is the first poem that we have recorded in our history, and this hero, Gilgam, is fighting against evil, Humbaba. But this person was actually protecting a pine tree, and this person is actually killing the person who was protecting this tree. So this wasn't an evil person. So I think we need to reread this text. This is another picture. It's London going out of time, and we see many bricks that are entering into the city, and they are making the trees run away. So this is how cities are being destroyed, and cities are destroying nature, excuse me. And I did make this image with AI.
녹지가 실제로는 굉장히 많은 도시
And I think that all of the green areas is like the green frosting on the cake, because this is the reality of our cities. We see more and more fires erupting in the mountains. We have floods, heavy rains, and if we look at Korea, on the right we have Seoul, on the left we have the Republic of Korea, and we have some statistics that is mapping out the number of species that are becoming extinct. And if our species become more and more extinct, it means that Seoul is becoming a city that is becoming more and more difficult for these plants and animals to live. We have about 2 million species currently in Korea. We need to do different things and take political measures in order to counter this problem. And as an urban planner and urban professionals, we need to consider everything that is being said in order to reduce the impact of space planning on our habitat. We have to find a way to carry out the right design and planning. And we have different reports that have come out, like the Living Planet report in 2024, that says that 85% of animals that are living near rivers and streams are getting the hardest hit. And we have the Han River in Seoul, but when we look at the river, we only consider the river for events, and we don't really think about protecting the plants and species around the Han River. I think that we need an ecological imagination in order to change the current situation. And we have to have the power to change and transform the relationship we have with nature. And here it says no dumping, because if we pollute this water, it will drain into the stream where we have a lot of living animals and plants.
와우, 제가 뭘 잘못했나요?
I think I pressed something. There are some things that we can do in the city to counter this. It was in the questions that were asked by the citizens, and one of my students did a calculation. And when we calculate the green area for the apartments in Seoul, if we add them all up, it's the area of Dongdaemun. If our apartment complexes change to become more green, then we can become more biodiverse. And there is a specific species, the otter, that is becoming extinct in Seoul. And because all of our soil has become artificial in large part, they have disappeared. So maybe between the apartment complexes, we can create natural soil and habitat for the otters to be able to live. That's what the students were imagining. And when we rebuild or remodel the apartment complexes, then maybe those land that have been donated can be used to house and welcome the natural habitat. And if we do this, we'll have artificial buildings and we'll have a natural habitat in between these concrete complexes. It was a very fun project, and when I saw this drawing, it was as if I was looking into a completely different and new world. These days, the apartment complexes are competing with nature, and apartment complexes are becoming more and more commercial. One private construction company asked me how we could change the landscaping of this apartment complex. And here what they did was very simple. We brought back the ecosystem of the habitat inside the apartment complex. And this is how it was changed. We didn't plant big trees, and we have more than 100 plants and flowers that have been planted inside the complex. The bird should be singing, but I'm not getting any audio. And we took this video right before we opened it up to the public. If we can create nature like this inside the apartment complexes, nature will grow on its own, naturally. Here we have insects that can live in this habitat, and citizens and residents can live in harmony with nature, not go against it. And this is how it has been transformed, and it is now open to the public. And there is this bird species that came into this habitat to live recently. I only have 2 minutes left, and one person gave a name to the plants in front of this wall, and Bruegel said, if we do something good for the birds, then it will be also good for humans. So I won't have time to explain all of this. What was fragmented has now been integrated in our plan, and here we were able to unify what was fragmented, and these are the pros and cons of doing that. We were able to increase the green areas, and including the public space, we were able to provide a bigger green space for the citizens. What was very innovative here was what was usually only 200 meters of the depth of the soil went down to 3,000. And this is my last work. And here in Sonyu Island, we created installation work of art, and we used a blueprint technology to print sunshine, and we have insect experts who are going on an expedition in Sonyu Island. We developed these insects into characters, and they were installed in a work of art. This will end my presentation after the video.
네.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to invite Professor Jahoon to come up on stage and provide his answers. He'll be talking about nature without us.
I have two microphones. How come I have two? Does this work? Good. And how do I advance the slide? Oh, there we are. Just a second. So a lot of us, I want to make a creative case for thinking about nature without us. A lot of times we forget that Korea was completely deforested during colonial times and after the war. And in these pictures from the UN, you can see in 40-year span how the landscape grew back. But the growing back was not natural. It was construction. It was actually through the hard efforts of the citizens that actually the forest was repopulated. And so Korea is not alone. Only about 23% of the Earth's terrestrial system is not modified by humans. So we actually have to think about nature as construction. And I'm sorry, I'm an architect, and I'm talking about landscape and construction at the same time. But this is the fact that natural systems have been disrupted by human activity. I started thinking about infrastructure in nature. This was a kind of experimental house where we took pieces of an old highway and made it into a house. And the important thing about that is that we were able to construct large-scale landscapes on the roof. But the other thing is that the highway itself is actually part of nature. It has embodied energy in it. Once you make something, it embodies energy, and once you throw it away, you throw that energy away from nature. So in expanding this idea of the landscape, there's this, we're constantly studying with our students this idea of constructed ground. And this is in Yongsan Park, for instance, where we're looking at the ground that's actually poisoned. It needs to be remediated. So are there any opportunities in the city where if you have to reconstruct the ground, can you reconnect different topographies and different habitats? Of course, another version of constructing nature is the atmosphere and the environment that we've created as humans and the climate change that's ensuing. And so nature in the city has to actually have a performative role. It has to perform, it has to absorb water, it has to offset heat island effect. This is another research project we did with LH Housing, where we're looking at pocket parks and we're looking at networks, but how they can begin to absorb heat and water. For instance, can the community still thrive and continue to function when there is an inevitable flood? So I'm inspired by this book by Alan Weissman. It's called The World Without Us, not Nature Without Us, but he imagines this incredible scene across different cities where humans disappear. And it's a science-based book, but a hypothetical case where ecosystems can evolve without humans there and how quickly actually the city begins to disintegrate. And so if we're inspired by this, we can look at different kinds of things, bringing back ecosystems within the city. And instead of thinking about 100% green coverage, we should also think about 100% habitat exchange. How can we actually bring habitats back into the city in an exchange for anything that we build? And so this is another project that I worked on with my lab, and it's an existing building, but we're also trying to deal with ruins, how to design ruins, and how architecture and nature begin to interlock in ruins. And it's interesting to see that actually children love playing in ruins. If you look at the ancient maps of Seoul, you don't see infrastructure. Well, you do see a kind of infrastructure, but it's mountains and streams. Those are the most important features. They're actually a network of ecological connections. But if you look at current maps, what you also see is the entire privileging of infrastructural networks. This is in Susong-gu in Daegu, and the map on the left is very interesting, actually. It shows a military base, but it's masked by a kind of fake mountain. If you see military bases in Korean maps, they're usually covered over, where in Google Maps, you actually see the military base inhabiting the most important part of this, one of the most important parts of this mountain, the kind of interconnected valley of this mountain. So we're working with the city on a research project. How do you make a transportation hub with public spaces that also allows a network of infrastructural connections, but a network of continuous nature. Because it's not about individual parks, it's about connecting actually like infrastructure, nature also needs to be connected across the city for habitats to coexist. And so therefore you need a much more generous, much more active section so that human activity and natural ecological systems can actually slip and slide underneath and around each other. And so the whole point of this is that I'm not advocating to evacuate nature and actually separate completely. I think as a creative exercise, it's important to think about nature without us. What would nature be without human activity? And use that as a kind of base starting point to be able to as a design kind of template to begin with. And so humans should not be, in a way, colonizing or controlling nature, but we should be guardians of habitats. Thank you. Oops.
Thank you, Professor Jahoon. Next, I would like to invite Jürgen Meyer from J. Meyer H. Architecture Studios to talk about living in harmony with nature. Jürgen Meyer, please come up on the stage.
네, 잠시 그 마이크를 차고 계신다고 하는데요.
Let's wait a while we prepare the microphone.
마이크 지금 찾으셨을까요?
Is everyone ready?
여러분, 큰 박수 부탁드립니다.
Everybody, welcome Mr. Meyer with a big round of applause.
Thank you so much. I will have to read because I want to make sure that I cover all the topics. There's a presentation that runs automatically behind me, so the talk is not necessarily directed to each image, but onto the whole topic of the presentation. Again, about nature, and as we heard like two very important contributions already, and I think this just adds maybe another layer to this concerns that we all have. In harmony with the elements, future-proofing Seoul with nature-driven urban design. As cities around the world confront the escalating impact of climate change, and this should run actually automatically every 5 seconds. Who is doing the presentation? Who is working on that? Huh? No, it's actually automatic. I should not have to do anything. As cities around the world confront the escalating impacts of climate change, Seoul stands at a decisive moment. Rising temperatures, heavier rainfall, declining air quality, and growing urban density are reshaping how we live. These are just environmental issues. They affect our health, homes, infrastructure, and everyday quality of life. In this context, future-proofing Seoul cannot be reduced to technical upgrades or green branding. We need a deeper shift in how we think about cities, how we plan, design, and build in relation to the natural world. We must move from a city that resists nature to a city that lives in harmony with it. This shift means working with the 4 elements that sustain life: air, water, land, and biodiversity. Let's begin with land, and more specifically with green space. Seoul is framed by nature. Mountains surround us, rivers run through the city. But within our neighborhoods, nature often disappears. Parks are fragmented, streets are dominated by concrete. In some districts, there's little shade, little birdsong, a few places to experience the rhythms of natural life. This needs to change. Seoul must evolve from scattered green pockets into the connected green infrastructure network. That means integrating nature throughout the city and not just in big parks, but in rooftop gardens, vertical greenery, schoolyards, sidewalks, and courtyards. Greening can happen at every scale, and every building, every neighborhood must play a role. But it's not just about cooling or beautification. Urban nature must be alive. We need to plant native species, welcome pollinators, and create habitats for birds and small animals. Because biodiversity is not just an environmental goal, it's the foundation of a resilient, healthy, and joyful city. And now the air. Airflow is invisible, but it shapes how we experience heat, comfort, and even health. Historically, winds move through the Han River Basin, the mountain valleys, cooling the city and clearing pollution. But many of these natural corridors have been blocked by dense, high-rise developments. We must plan for wind. That means designing street layouts and building heights that allow the city to breathe. It means protecting natural wind paths and planting trees that guide air movement and cool the environment. With real-time environmental data, we can also design more intelligently by adjusting materials, shapes, and surfaces in response to heat, humidity, and pollution. When we work with wind, we reduce our reliance on air conditioning. We build neighborhoods that feel cooler, fresher, and more livable, especially for the elderly, children, and vulnerable communities. Now let's turn to water. Seoul's rivers and streams have always been part of this identity, but many of them, like small creeks and seasonal flows, have been buried or turned into concrete channels. In an age of heavier and more unpredictable rainfall, this old approach no longer works. We need to design Seoul as a sponge city, as a city that absorbs, filters, and uses rainwater instead of simply draining it away. This means using permeable pavements, rain gardens, bioswales, and green roofs. It means reopening buried streams and transforming riverbanks into places where water and people can safely meet. Water should not be hidden, it should be seen, felt, and celebrated. Imagine continuous car-free promenades along the river's floodable parks that protect during storms and invite play during sunshine. Public places where water is not a threat, but a shared experience. Together, these interventions help Seoul adapt to climate change with beauty, flexibility, and ecological intelligence. They don't just reduce risk, they add life to the city. Beneath all of this is a single unifying idea. We must design not against nature, but with it. And this brings us to biodiversity, not as a side benefit, but as a core metric of success. A future-proof city is one where humans and non-humans thrive side by side. A city where trees, birds, insects, mosses, even wind and water are treated as essential citizens of the urban fabric. To design for biodiversity is to design for resilience, for interconnection, for care. And that requires a shift in mindset, from domination to partnership, from short-term fixes to long-term ecological thinking, from human-centered city to a truly life-centered one. This is more than a challenge for architects and planners. It's a cultural opportunity and a call for all of us to participate. To imagine a city where climate adaptation is inseparable from cultural renewal, where resilience is rooted in beauty, in justice, and in everyday moments of connection with the living world. And now let's ground this vision in a real example, soon to be built here in Seoul. The 50 Cheongdam Tower by our office J. Meyer H. Architects is more than a landmark. It is a living prototype of what future-proof, nature-integrated development can look like in the city. Located in the dense Cheongdam district, this tower is guided by 5 principles: zero energy, zero water waste, zero emissions, zero waste, zero ignorance. But these are not slogans, they are built into every level of the design. From solar energy and rainwater recycling to passive ventilation and green facades, this building breathes with the city rather than walling itself off from it. It's not sustainable, it's generative. Its terraces improve airflow, its vegetation supports urban diversity, biodiversity. Its forms respect the surrounding wind corridors and microclimate. And it offers public space, not just private luxury. The 50 Tower doesn't fight nature, it learns from it, it works with it. It shows us that high density, high-performance architecture can still be rooted in care, climate, and coexistence. As Seoul looks to the future, we don't need to start from scratch. We already have role models, real buildings in this very city that point the way forward. The challenge now is to scale that vision, to embed it not just in special projects, but in the very DNA of how we build, live, and imagine our future together. Because the goal is not to survive the future. The goal is to thrive within it, in harmony with the elements, in deep partnership with the living world around us. Thank you.
네, 여러분 큰 박수 부탁.
Thank you very much. Yes, we've heard answers from the partner architects in response to the citizens' questions on nature. We need to develop the green spaces within the city and allow nature and humans to coexist and thrive together. This is the challenge facing us. We'll start session 2, which is about human. The citizens' questions will be shown through video. With the changing weather due to climate change, walking is becoming a less appealing choice. Yet walking the city still enriches people's daily lives. I'm curious about Seoul's ongoing efforts to build social networks through urban design. In today's society where the internet is highly developed and individualism is emphasized, how do people form and maintain relationships? Also, tall vertical buildings tend to isolate people naturally. What solutions can address this issue? I think the future Seoul will become a vertical city with underground, ground level, and aerial connections. However, I'm not sure if such a city structure can guarantee a human and nature-friendly environment. I'm also concerned about how it will harmonize with familiar existing landscapes. In this context, what measures can ensure both citizens' right to pursue happiness and the efficient use of urban space? And how should we set the paradigm for future cities? I am a homemaker living in Seoul. When we talk about housing in Seoul, it usually means apartments. While they are convenient and safe, actually living in them often brings a sense of disconnection due to problems like noise traveling between floors, parking issues, and lack of spaces to interact with neighbors. After reconstruction, this becomes worse. Shouldn't the future of apartments focus less on housing prices or external appearances and more on preserving relationships among residents while accommodating diverse lifestyles? I'd like to know how this is possible. For young workers in Seoul, finding housing is extremely difficult. Even if they want to live near their workplaces, rent is often too expensive, so many end up commuting long distances. If job housing proximity were possible, quality of life would be very different. Is it possible to create new housing models that allow young people to live closer to their workplaces? And what changes might such a shift bring, not only for young people, but also for the city as a whole? Hello, I am an office worker living in Seongbuk-gu. Large cultural facilities such as theaters and exhibition halls are concentrated in specific areas, making it difficult to access culture in daily life. I would love to attend performances nearby or spend time with others naturally in small libraries or community centers. To what extent can vacant buildings or unused spaces be repurposed into everyday cultural spaces? And is it really possible to build a city where culture and art are more easily experienced within our everyday lives? Thank you. Thank you. This is session 2, which deals with citizens' questions on humans. the residential spaces and cultural spaces for humans. We'll listen to the answers provided by our partners. First, from Mr. Dominique Perrault from DPA, he'll be talking about Nexus Seoul, the power of integral thinking.
Pour cette 5e biennale de l'architecture, mais aussi de la ville. Le thème, c'est en fait un thème d'expérience, un thème de vie et de vivre avec la ville qui existe, et aussi celle que nous construisons. Cette ville, elle est devenue géante. C'est une tache d'huile. Elle n'arrête pas de grandir à l'horizontale. Je pense qu'il faut que l'on bloque ce développement à l'horizontale et que l'on travaille la ville dans son épaisseur. C'est une dimension qui n'est pas utilisée aujourd'hui. On oublie le dessous, on pense qu'au-dessus, on monte de plus en plus haut, pensant que la solution se trouve dans le ciel, dans l'espace aérien. Peut-être qu'un complément serait bienvenu avec un travail à partir du sol, ce que moi j'ai appelé le groundscape. Ce qu'on a montré lors de la Biennale il y a 4 ans, comment la ville pouvait être résiliente avec cette préhension du sol, un sol actif, un sol vivant, un sol qui va permettre de développer des racines pour l'ensemble de nos bâtiments. Un sol comme on le voit sur cette image, c'est-à-dire un sol qui est capable de régénérer la ville, qui est capable de densifier la ville sans nouvelle construction visible. L'idée est en fait d'introduire la lumière dans le sol. À Séoul, nous avons des exemples. Un exemple qui travaille avec le sol, avec l'université féminine de Iowa, où la démonstration est faite que l'architecture ne construit pas un bâtiment, elle construit un paysage. Eh bien, pour le grand complexe de GITC, la lumière va entrer dans le sol à plusieurs dizaines de mètres de profondeur et on pourra circuler d'une station de métro à une autre, prendre le train. Effectivement, des dizaines de milliers de voyageurs tous les jours utiliseront cette galerie. C'est une espèce de lobby urbain, de lounge urbain. C'est un lieu de transport, c'est un lieu d'échange, c'est un lieu de rendez-vous. Ce n'est pas un lieu fonctionnel. C'est une autre relation ou rapport avec la ville, avec son quotidien. On n'a pas le sentiment d'être enfermé dessous, puisque la lumière arrive. Et donc, il y a là un lieu collectif, un lieu public. En fait, le prolongement de l'espace public dans le dessous. Ce qui veut dire pour nous, pour moi, pour cette biennale et les suivantes, il faut transformer l'infrastructure en architecture. L'infrastructure devient une architecture. Et avec ce théorème, si je puis dire, eh bien, la ville va pouvoir se régénérer sur elle-même, les bâtiments vont créer leurs propres racines, et donc on va introduire de nouvelles expériences, de nouveaux lieux protégés, à l'abri de séismes, à l'abri même de guerre. Il y a donc dans le dessous cette notion de résistance de la ville, cette notion de protection également de la ville par rapport à ses citoyens. Et je crois qu'il y a, au travers de ces idées, il faut utiliser en fait tout. En français, nous disons faire feu de tout bois. C'est-à-dire utiliser toutes les idées, toutes les ressources pour que la ville devienne un lieu d'hébergement pour la population, pour l'humanité. Et c'est cette notion d'hébergement qui est un peu notre engagement. Comment utiliser le dessous pour qu'il soit aussi un lieu d'hébergement, d'accueil, un lieu qui permette à la ville de se régénérer sur elle-même et ne plus s'étendre à l'horizontale. La ville du quart d'heure, comme le dit Carlos Moreno, elle n'est pas seulement horizontale. Moi je dis que la ville du quart d'heure, elle est aussi verticale. Elle n'est pas seulement verticale en montant à 100, 200, 500 ou 1 km de hauteur, elle l'est aussi en descendant à 10 mètres, à 20 mètres, à 30 mètres de profondeur. Cette ville du quart d'heure, elle est aussi vers le dessous. Et donc, cette relation avec le dessous, c'est une façon aussi d'avoir une autre vision, de renverser la table, de voir la ville différemment, de regarder la ville comme un ensemble, comme une substance, comme un lieu qui permet à chacun d'y vivre, d'y travailler, d'y trouver en fait tout ce dont il a besoin sans une mobilité extrême. Il faut des infrastructures, il faut que les infrastructures deviennent des architectures, il faut que les infrastructures permettent d'habiter la ville comme on habite des logements. L'infrastructure doit être de l'architecture, elle permettra aussi de faire entrer la nature dans ce dispositif de transport, également la dimension humaine bien sûr, et bien sûr surtout la dimension architecturale. Donc la Biennale de Séoul, effectivement c'est l'architecture, mais c'est aussi la ville. Plusieurs villes sont toujours invitées, il y a toujours cet échange entre Séoul et le reste du monde, et ces échanges sont très riches, très fructueux. Il faut continuer à développer cette relation, l'architecture, la ville, l'homme et évidemment la technologie.
네, 이어서
We will listen to the next answer from Heatherwick Studios. Thomas Heatherwick will be talking about why humans need human cities.
네, 여러분 큰 박수 부탁드립니다.
Please give him a big hand.
Hello, everybody. I'm very excited to be standing here in this city at this time, a city that is daring to have a conversation with its citizens about what the future of a city should be. I haven't seen that happening in other cities around the world like this. So just that happening is so important. And the context is this book. The digital technologies that we have all benefited from in many ways have also had a shadow or a dark side. And my friend wrote this book called The Lonely Century, and the title breaks my heart. And in this era where the triumph of the technology is that you can stay at home and work, you can stay at home and do your shopping, you can stay at home and be entertained, and you can stay in bed and get a PhD, our public world wasn't designed to be in competition with your home or your bedroom. It was what it was, and it had a vitality and a life, and now it's cheaper for many businesses to not bother to make real physical shops. And the lesson that we've also learnt is that streets without life aren't calm. They aren't safer when there's less people. They're actually scarier. And actually, it's more dangerous when a street doesn't have people on it. We're more scared of each other. And the reason this matters so much is my friend Carlo Ratti, who's the curator of the Architecture Biennale in Venice at the moment, wrote an article a few weeks ago with the statistic that we are spending less time outside with each other, seeing each other, and the algorithms that we were all so excited about, the World Wide Web, the internet, that was going to be this great democratizer where we would all see each other. Actually, in reality, it makes us separate. Those algorithms take us apart and then make us, in relation to each other, quite horrible sometimes.
and toxic, which when we have physical proximity to people, often civility breaks out because you understand their humanity. And the lesson I've learned, and the lesson that inspired me to follow the biennales that have happened before here, was to look at how do we actually change the world around us. We've had an epidemic of soulless buildings being built, characterless buildings all over the world. Opera houses, they're always good. Art museums, they're always good. Often the big airport is good, but the general 99% of buildings often are mean. And it's like they don't understand that their job is not just to serve the people inside them, but to be generous to society. And so the lesson I've learned is that we all keep hoping in the architecture industry that the leaders will tell us the answers, or clients will become better, or city planners will say, please give us more engaging human things. But the reality of the world is that pali, like get it done, again and again and again, efficiency, spatial efficiency, cost, have been celebrated and regarded as success. But we've not been making successful places actually for society at the same time as the success of building fast. And what I've learned is that it's not just leaders. Leaders listen. But unless society actually talks, which is why this is so exciting, is that leaders don't have all the answers, but a good leader hears what people are talking about. Now, 30 years ago, we were not talking about the climate crisis. 10-year-olds knew nothing about it. It was not a thing in the air of public conversation. But it is now, and every 10-year-old knows about it, and that influences the decision makers. Even the property developers who build boring, soulless, characterless buildings, they still will tell you what a great guy they are because their building is green and it's a sponge and that it's very well insulated and it's won an award for that, but it's still kind of mean to society more broadly. So I've realized, and that's why the Biennale this year, it's all about the public conversation, because we don't talk. We all feel powerless and we're waiting. And the architects, we're kind of waiting and hoping that the property developer will be extra kind to us somehow and say, go on, be more creative. But it's not going to happen from the top. It happens from the bottom, and then the top listens, and then that it means that the good outcome finally happens. So it's happened with the climate crisis. It is a conversation. It is influencing policymakers, not as fast as we want, but it is in the discussion, and every building now has to justify itself with its green credentials. And so we have a thing where we're having a forum like this. Also, 90% of people say buildings affect them. They know, and this is a conversation we have not had in the world of construction, which is to acknowledge that functionality hasn't included mental health. We don't get trained in mental health. We don't talk actually about the health impact of building buildings, that it is a public health issue. It is not just an art issue and so-called functionality and optimization of cost and efficiency. At the same time, it's about public health. And what was so exciting, these are all from the polling for the Biennale that we did, is that almost half of all the citizens are willing to get involved. And today this forum shows that. So the Biennale itself was trying to break out from echo chambers. I know that there is probably a dentistry Biennale at the moment where the dentists talk to the dentists. And I arrived at the airport and I bumped into a friend who's in the digital world and said, why are you here? And he said, I'm here for the blockchain Biennale. And you're like, what? Blockchain Biennale? Everyone talks to themselves. And so we wondered if we could build on the success of this city's conversations to make the most public Biennale, because that public conversation will have the biggest change. So the challenge is the 99% of buildings. How do we make them radically more human? And the heart of it started with almost like a fishing lure, is something which the whole city sees right in the center of the city, that is a discussion provoker to bring people together, and to that everyone, even a 14-year-old or a 99-year-old, will think, what? What's that? And then they might get involved. But actually within this is the research and science, and as well as amazing examples of how we can humanize buildings. And we've also, instead of having drawings and text and renderings, we've asked an incredible range of people to build full-size pieces of buildings, because the best way to show what buildings could be and make it unignorable is to make things real. And so we've got, I hope you will all come if you haven't already, but the heart of it is that our industry has spent, I believe, too much time thinking about the people inside buildings, because the people who pay our fees are the people who tend to want their wonderful group of employees to love them and to have a great canteen and to have great meeting spaces and gathering spaces. But is that building mean to society or kind to people who will never go inside, 14-year-olds who will never work for you? How do we make something when hundreds of times more people are outside the buildings? So South Korea is world famous for skin. You are the masters of skin on this planet. And so this Biennale is looking at how do we make generous and kind skins, because actually every building should be a community center in spirit in what it gives to the people around. And I think this public conversation is so valuable, so important for the emotional intelligence and us in a construction industry that says it's functional but forgets that emotion is a function. Thank you.
네, 답변 이어가겠습니다. 이어서
Let's listen to the next answer from Hanyang University. Professor Gu Jahoon will be talking about community-oriented apartments. Let's give him a big hand.
화면 넘겨주세요.
Can you put up my slides?
화면이 켜지는 동안에 미리 좀
While we're waiting, I will start.
지금까지 보셨던 PPT하고 다를 겁니다.
My PPTs are going to be different from the ones you saw before, because architects and landscapers, they show a lot of images to convey emotion, but I study cities. So I prepared my PPTs like for a lecture, and my support group disappeared since last year, so I prepared the PowerPoints. The title is Community-Oriented Apartments, Is It Sustainable? And there's a question mark. So, is this possible, is my question. We cannot speak about Seoul without talking about apartments, because 60% of the buildings in Seoul are apartment buildings. So we're going to look at the advantages and disadvantages of apartments, and we're going to look at apartments 2.0 and see what the issues are. This is my second topic. And thirdly, I'm going to try to answer the questions that we were asked and how we can change our housing culture. So we know that there's even a pop song entitled Apartment, 아파트, 아파트, that was a big hit. And whether it's a young person or an elderly person, everybody wants to own an apartment. This is Seoul, and it's kind of like a symbol of your wealth. But it's also a place where people are isolated, where there's a lot of conflict. As you know, it's too dense, and they're too high, and it's too flat. And so the sense of community has disappeared. And where can we communicate and have interaction inside the apartments? Of course, there are playgrounds for the kids, but where can we communicate and interact in the apartments? Elevators. And so when we go inside the elevator, some people we know, some people we don't, so it's very awkward. And there are a lot of socio-cultural elements that we need to take into account. Everybody is very individualistic, and there's a lot of conflict because we don't think this is a neighborhood. We don't think people are neighbors. We just think apartments have an asset value. And so we're not really interested in community or our neighbors. This is what you already know. In the age of apartment 1.0, we couldn't avoid that because after the 1970s, we had to build apartment complexes to respond to high demand. But now, in the age of 2.0, we have many apartment complexes that are being rebuilt. They are becoming higher, more dense, and the problem is these rebuilt apartment buildings are also negatively impacting the urban landscape because they are separated from the surrounding environment. And we also have social impact of the apartments. There's a polarization, and we have the press talking about how expensive a specific apartment complex is in Seoul. And if people don't live in these very rich areas, you're considered a loser. And we don't really try to reflect the changed lifestyle of our citizens. And we try to respond to the needs of the apartment 1.0 population when that population has changed. And we just try to focus on massively building these apartment complexes. Then my question is, what will our next generation do when they rebuild their apartment complexes? Is it going to go up higher? Is it going to be more densified? Then if we go wrong, then in the future we can become a necropolis, and our future generations may have nowhere to live in. If we don't consider this for the 100 years of Seoul's future, we will not be able to survive. We have the population decreasing, and we have the number of people living in a family that will also fall in the future. But we are continuing to build apartment complexes like this, and I think we have 210 apartment buildings that have been apartment projects that have been passed, and they will be built soon. And we have single households and families that are becoming smaller, and we need childcare facilities and also facilities for the elderly, but we are not taking into account the demographic changes when we build our apartments. And we also need a 15-minute daily life concept to be adopted, where people can work, live, and play within an area of 15 minutes, but that is not taken into consideration. Is an apartment complex a community? We can't really say it is, but it needs to have some sense of community, some sense of belonging. And the members of the community need to interact. And there are 3 ways to recover a sense of community. Some of it has been recovered in some apartment complexes, but it's only those who are living in the apartment complexes, the residents, who form a community. They don't interact with the people outside, and they are not connected to what is outside of the apartment complex. And they don't allow nature to come into the apartment complex. And they only think about the asset value of this apartment complex. And so this is the sense of community that exists currently. And so we need to change this with different policies, maybe. Maybe within a perimeter of 15 minutes, we can consider apartment complexes for children or customized complexes that can respond to diverse needs. We can't just follow the commercial values. I think when we think about the future and future generations, we need to think about all of this. Within a perimeter of 15 minutes, we need to think about what programming we need to put in the apartment complexes. And this is one project that I directed, a Seoul Innovation Park, and right now, I think our projects are not considering the needs of the future generations. We are just focusing on the current needs. What we want to do for a sustainable housing plan is to create a sustainable housing model that will enable people to live a multifaceted life 100 years from now. And we have to think about the social aspect, the policy aspect, and the commercial aspect. And we have to set up the right principles in the policies, and we need to enable children to live in the complex when they are young and also continue to live in that apartment complex when they grow older. And we need to support this with some policies. And from a commercial perspective, we have some codes and laws that cover remodeling that is vertical and horizontal, but it's not really followed. And maybe we need more support on that aspect, and we need to expand our policy support for the different projects that are aiming to build a customized housing complex. Thank you very much for your attention.
Yes, thank you. That was answers from our architecture partners in response to the citizens' questions regarding humans. Now, session 3 is about Humanience. We'll listen to the questions from citizens. Hello, I am a resident of Gangsagu, a public official, and a person interested in urban planning. I'm interested in 100% Humanience City, the hyper-connected AI city, and the door-to-door AI Nexus. How are these fundamentally different from existing concepts such as smart cities or digital twins? And beyond technological connectivity, what kinds of human and social values do they ultimately pursue? Finally, I'd like to know how the cities we are aiming for now differ from the ultimate cities we should strive to reach. Although technology keeps advancing, in reality, citizens often don't feel much change. Even with talk about smart cities and AI, the tangible impact on daily life feels limited. Shouldn't technology move beyond being just a tool and instead integrate naturally into everyday life to make it more comfortable and dignified? And intensifying heat waves and sudden floods due to climate crisis makes life very hard. Can technology truly help in this regard? Also, instead of demolishing and rebuilding, how can remodeling older buildings to save energy and reduce carbon be promoted? What technologies and systems would be necessary to spread this practice from public buildings to the private sector? Seoul still feels like a car-centered city. Because of its vast road network, citizens often find it difficult to walk or move freely. In the future, will it be possible to connect various mobility options such as autonomous shuttles, shared bicycles, and electric scooters, all centered around public transportation? Can we create a city where anyone can move more safely and freely? Also, instead of replacing people's jobs, could technology become a tool that helps people engage in more meaningful work? I'd like to know if Seoul is preparing for such a future. Today, technologies such as smart streetlights, CCTVs, and traffic data collection are being used throughout the city. While it's good that they improve convenience and safety, many citizens worry about privacy breaches. In the future, shouldn't the use of collected data be made transparent? And shouldn't systems be in place so citizens can feel reassured? As technology becomes more deeply embedded in everyday life, how can it be managed in a way that earns and sustains citizens' trust? Seoul seems to face major challenges: the climate crisis, ultra-high density, and rapid digital transformation. In this situation, I wonder how science and technology can go beyond being tools or systems and instead help build a city for people. If concepts like the 5-minute garden city or vertical gardens can actually be realized, citizens would be able to enjoy nature more closely in their daily lives. If an AI system could connect the entire city, it would be helpful to build a pedestrian-centered city. Is Seoul advancing towards such a biodigital city? How would it change our lives? Yes. We heard the citizens' questions regarding Humanience. Now we will listen to the answers from our partners.
From UN Studio, Ben van Berkel will talk about Sustainable Future City, Technology is the Key. And we will watch a video. Let's watch together.
My name is Ben van Berkel. I'm the principal architect and founder of UNS. Technology can play an incredibly important role because we can now understand much better the movement of, call it the external forces coming into the city, like how through mobility or through the forces of weather or the way how we go from work to our home, or who are the visitors coming, the tourists coming to the city, can be all mapped out today of what kind of effect that has on the city. And but we have to understand the diversity of the technology, of the data, maybe better to say, and be selective in the way how we can design with that information and gear the city in a new direction. So technology is fascinating and it's a tool, but the most important is how can you design with that tool. The most important is to use technology for, in my opinion, to make cities healthier and the buildings healthier and less toxic, call it. And with that you can of course use technology a lot for that as well. Well, the future of cities will have to deal with mobility a lot in the future because the amount of densification and the amount of transport in most of our major larger cities in the world, they are rethinking now how to make city life a little bit more healthier. So, for instance, look at cities like Paris or especially Dubai, or we noticed that also here in Holland, for instance, that we have major discussions about it. How can we bring out the cars a bit more out of the city centers? There's too much congestion, it's generating still not good quality of air in the city. So can we not rethink mobility hubs, for instance? And could we not, for instance, make the rings around the cities more the places where we introduce other transport hubs, whereby maybe you park there when you come into the city, and that you go with an electric pod or another, or with a bicycle, you go then into the city center. So to take out a bit more the stress of the city center. Yeah, these mobility hubs, they could be seen as power stations in a way, because if you have all these electric cars coming to a parking place where you hopefully do more than parking, maybe you work there partly, or you have restaurants, and you maybe move over to another transport system, then maybe this building can give energy to maybe the context of other buildings. Or maybe there is a way that we think of other sustainable ways of moving from one place to the other. We do now so many cable car projects in the world, because it's cheap to build, it's highly sustainable, and what people don't know is that from, let's say, Amsterdam, the Amsterdam city center towards the north part of the city, you can move in an hour close to 5 to up to 7,000, 8,000 people in an hour to the other place. And a cable car system is far more cheaper than a tunnel or a bridge design when you have to move over the water or whatever. So these are new sustainable ways of rethinking mobility within the city. Today you have a lot of tools, but we believe, especially when you have the city planners thinking about the future of the city, then you have to also maybe build your own tool or your set of tools. For instance, we use a carbon builder tool, and that is measuring the performative aspect of the way how you build from where, what in the city. So where do the materials come from, how much is the car traveling in order to get the materials in the site, and that's all to do with the whole process of building and what kind of carbon footprint that generates. But another aspect is the embodied carbon footprint, and that's the material side of the way how you deal with buildings. And we can measure that now very quickly in a design we have made, and even if we have a sketch design, then we can test it now in an hour, what kind of footprint that generates for that building, and if we have to make the building lower or higher, or do we have to keep some of the old buildings where we are working with when we have to renew some parts. And how much do you keep some of the older buildings when you work with transformation projects, for instance, in order to keep the building alive, and with that you generate less carbon footprints. So this is a whole discussion right now within the profession, luckily enough. How much can we keep our buildings and transform them in order for that to make these buildings and our environment more sustainable? And I think it's a very good environmental new approach, but it needs also another design approach from our side.
네, 벤 반 베르켈님.
Thank you very much, Mr. Van
이어서 답변
Berkel.
이어가겠습니다.
Now we will continue
서울대학교
with
맹필수
Professor
교수님께서
Meng Pilsu from Seoul
넥서스
National
서울 일상에
University.
스며드는 기술을
He'll talk
주제로
about
발표해
Humanience,
주시겠습니다. 박수로 모시겠습니다.
Nexus 100. Ubiquitous computing was first suggested by Mark Weiser. He said that the most profound technologies are those that disappear. People expect that the city will be transformed in a spectacular way due to technologies. But the city that I envision is not a city of such. It's a city that's quiet yet dynamic, while preserving the existing features. That means that the technology weave themselves into the fabric of everyday life until they are indistinguishable from it. And city is not just a collection of technologies. It's going to be a quiet helper. Technology will only be meaningful when it is woven into the everyday life of people. Another person called William Gibson said that the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed. New technologies are applied and changes taking place in a dynamic way. Seoul is one of the most is a city that rapidly accepts technology. But now we have to break away from our past way of accepting technology and thinking about how technology will serve human beings. Now I'll talk about the role of technology. First, in the climate crisis era, urban technology is divided into passive technology, active technology, hard technology, and soft technology. This is a 2x2 matrix, and it allows us to see from a short to long-term view. And it also allows us to think about how we can apply it three-dimensionally. I believe that hard technologies can be applied to the modern city. This is my area of interest. Nexus Seoul Next100 is suggesting a vertical mixed-use city. And here it considers the fact that there are multimodal transportation and a very sloping topography. Here I applied my concept in this project. It's about creating a park that meets the challenge of different levels in Seoul City. Many citizens asked this question, and it was a very important topic in yesterday's Biennale, and that's about building renovation and sustainable technology. We can rebuild and repurpose existing buildings in an eco-friendly manner. Many such projects took place in Seoul. For example, in Busan, they combined several old buildings, and here, Samil Building, an old building, was renovated. This is another Hana Bank who placed one building which completely transformed an existing building. These renovation projects are also being applied to infrastructure. For example, an abandoned basement or old roads or abandoned buildings are being repurposed. However, these renovations should not be just left to the private sector to do. The public sector needs to play a more active role. In the future, many creative technologies will be introduced to also renovate existing major public buildings. This is the Donimun Museum Village right next to where we are. It's a project that a whole block was preserved, and it is a very good example. Here, Seoul City is planning to completely demolish the existing facilities to make it into a park. Nowadays, I wonder if that is the best way, because we are now looking at parks and buildings in completely separate manners. This sort of method is also part of what Mr. Heatherwick said. We can set an example and a good precedence. I believe that mobility innovation is what transformed the way the city works most. Self-driving cars will be introduced, and that will affect the amount of space used for traffic and parking. The spaces that used to be serving transportation can be used for human activities, and we can see examples in these places. Along with public transit, personal mobility, car sharing, and shuttles will allow people to move from door to door through a very dense transportation network. Shifting the city's geographical concept and three-dimensional spatial utilization is another change that will take place. Multi-level public spaces will be provided to citizens. Technology is also changing our workplace. AI is being introduced. Unmanned factory is changing the workplace. This also should allow citizens' life to become more positive. Homo Ludens, a study of the play element in culture, was an art by Johann Huizinga. And it emphasizes the fact that people find meaning in their life by play, not work. Because work is so repetitive, imagination and play allows people to recreate themselves. It makes their life more rich. This is the Dangin-lee Podium and Promenade, which was by Min-Seok Cho. Peter Breyer's complex zone was applied and allowed people to see the possibility of such a play space being introduced within the city. These changes are taking place continuously. Seoul will continue to change actively and become a place where the old and the new can coexist side by side with new technologies. Thank you.
네, 맹필수 교수님.
Thank you, Professor Meng. Next, Professor Oh Eung-sung from Hongik University will talk about science-based biodigital Seoul. Please give him a big hand. In order to finish in time, I have put up a timer at 8 minutes on the podium. It's already 3. You're probably already a bit tired and sleepy. And with Professor Kang and Jürgen Meyer and Professor Kim, while we were having lunch, 2 p.m. we said was very dangerous because we tend to get very sleepy around that time. I'm the last speaker to talk about technology, and we had some good presentations before me. It was very romantic and emotional, but I am going to read the script that I have prepared.
자, 시작하겠습니다.
I will start.
뒤로 안 넘어가네. 네. 네. 존경하는 서울 시민 여러분 그리고
Citizens of Seoul and architects from around the world,
I
have studied in France and Korea, and I have worked in architecture and landscaping, and I have worked on research touching upon nature and human and the conversion of the two. And during the past 10 years, I've been working on environmental issues and how to respond to the climate crisis. And I think we have expanded the human-based city into a bio-digital city because of the times. And I'm going to reply to the citizens' questions, and I will base my answers on technology and science and how we can use technology and science to connect to nature. And I am dreaming of a future Seoul that will be science-based and bio-digital. There are three things that are very important. Nature that is embedded in the vertical garden. The second one is humanized gardens and green areas that we can access in 5 minutes. And I would like to talk about smart park care and smart trees. How science and the bio-digital can allow us to move closer to nature. Now, I would like to answer the questions that were raised by the citizens with my slides. Seoul is facing 3 challenges: the climate crisis, ultra-densification, and converting to digital. Can technology help us become more resilient and make us safer? Artist science is technology. I think we need to add human here. Bio-digital Seoul is a place where art, technology, and human is all gathered together. Can we trust the data? Can we trust science, transparency, and citizen participation and governance? If it's human-centered, then we can trust technology. What about the system-wide AI city stack? Data will create a platform which will create services, and this will create a place. And the city will be able to collect data through the sensor network, and the platform will be able to analyze and predict based on the data that it has, and then we'll be able to create a customized service based on the smart data, and we'll be able to create a safer environment for the citizens. But then the citizens said, can technology respond to climate change? And my reply is, technology will be an invisible safety net. It will allow us to predict and respond and recover. And we also talk about embedded vertical gardens and the 5-minute garden. Smart park care and smart trees will allow us to do that. Technology allows us to make our cities more human and green. The 5-minute garden means we will create green pockets within a perimeter of 1 kilometer. The citizens' question was, can technology benefit everyone? Well, this garden is the answer. The technology will be embedded not only in expensive buildings, but in alleyways and in public spaces. And vertical gardens will create a green network, and in this public space, everybody will be able to get the biodiverse services. Will technology be owned by a minority? No, because nature will be embedded with technology and it will make society more equal. This is the example of Sejong Lake and this is the R&D that I did between 2001 and 2002. Smart tree monitoring example is a platform where citizens participate directly, and one question was, can we trust the data? And we see that through engagement and transparency, we can trust the data. AI mobility and walkability means we can walk on land and also look up toward the sky. And can technology secure safety? By integrating all the data, we will enable people to walk around the city in a very safe way. The biodiversity program that we have is not something that is in silo. We want to become local and global at the same time. Seoul's experience, will it have an impact on the world? I think it does, because it can be expanded and widen its reach. Nexus Seoul Next Bag is an urban platform that calls for global cooperation. And Seoul will rally with the world in order to create Nexus Seoul Next 100. And 1, digital twin, 2, bio network, and the biosensor common platform will create the pillars. How can we trust the reliability of the data? Well, laws and regulations will have to ensure that that happens. Resilience, trust, and inclusivity will be very important. Technology will enable us to do all three of these things, and we will be recognized by the citizens. My last message is very clear. Science-based biodigital Seoul, and biodigital science is technology. Art and humanities, if it's connected with technology, will enable the city of Seoul to become a living city. And this is the answer I give to the citizens of Seoul and to the vision of Next 100 Seoul.
Thank you very much. Please join me in giving a big round of applause to all of our speakers. We heard from the partners and their answers to the questions by citizens. Nature, human, Humanience were the three topics of which questions were asked and answered by the architecture partners. For the next 100 years of Seoul, sustainable living, culture, technology, and related models were proposed by the speakers. We will have a 15-minute break and start the roundtable discussion from 4:05. During this roundtable discussion, we will go into the specific topics in further depth.
네, 여러분 잠시 자리를 정돈해 주시기 바랍니다. 아직
We are about to start, so I would like to invite you to come back into the hall. We are about to start part 2 of the forum.
자리에 착석하시면 잠시 후에 2부 포럼을
We will
시작하도록
soon
하겠습니다.
start part 2 of our forum.
네, 좌장님 마이크 한번 봐주시겠어요?
Can we test the mic?
네, 좌장님 마이크 한번 연결 부탁드립니다.
Could you connect the mic, please?
네, 모두 착석한 것 같아서
I think everyone's ready.
종합 토론 시작해 보려고
So
합니다.
we will start part 2,
종합 토론에서는
the general discussion session of the forum.
이슈를 바탕으로
Based on
건축가님과
what has been raised in part 2, our Seoul City architect and our partners will have a general discussion.
네, 7분 모두 자리를
We have
해주시는데요.
7 people up on stage, and I would like to invite Professor Kang Byung-gun, Seoul City architect, to host the general discussion. I give you the floor. Could everybody move up to the front? Because if you move up to the front, we can look at each other and have a more comfortable conversation. So let's think that this is a conversation we are having in a cozy room. We are having this general discussion because we wanted to ask Seoul citizens about what kind of future they wanted, and we want to create a social system that will help them do that. And Thomas Heatherwick, who is sitting right next to me, has repeated this several times during the Biennale. We don't want to just hear the professionals. We don't want to just listen to the future that is envisioned by the experts. We want to do it together, and citizens must participate in this process. Is a very important message, and that's why citizens asked the questions, and our partners who are thinking about the future of Seoul answered the questions. We have 3 topics, and James Corner mentioned that they are not separate. They are all connected, and that is true. We can think of nature, nature human, nature intelligence, and everything is connected. But let's first talk about nature together. Why don't we do this? I don't think we need to designate someone to speak, taking turns. I would just like to ask our partners with regard to the questions that have been asked by the citizens and the answers that have been given. You can comment on that, or you can comment on another partner's presentation and what kind of future you see for Seoul 100 years from now, and what kind of nature you envision for Seoul in the future. Mr. Meyer, would you like to start first?
Yes, thank you very much. When I saw the images also that you, Thomas, showed with the Germany demonstrations in, I think, today, you know, where you see youth, I had flashbacks to my youth when I was, you know, young, in the, let's say, mid-70s, 1970s. And we had very similar discussions. It was in relationship to war, it was in relationship to safety, but also it was in relationship to our health and environment. We had these demonstrations in our cities against nuclear power plants. We had you know, a whole movement where we didn't use plastic bags anymore. We actually used these jute bags. Is it jute? Jute bags, yeah. It was called jute instead of plastic movement. We had these kind of peace chains where people were like hundreds of, like thousands of people holding their hands, which created a long, like kilometer-long lines of like peace, you know, human chains in landscapes, on streets, on rural areas, to demonstrate against, you know, the Cold War and the confrontation between East and West. And since that moment, I felt the world is getting better and better. You know, we would learn how we would, you know, consume in a more conscious way. Of course, you know, the world became cleaner. Every day, at that time, we talked about sour rain, like acid rain, and how the German forests and the forests of the world will die. And there were like photos that proved it. So we were living in a very similar situation emotionally and also consciously, that we are just basically in front of the end of the world. And then everything got better. The Cold War stopped. There was peace all over the world all of a sudden, or we thought it would be. And then everything just goes downhill again. And I think we're in a very similar situation that I experienced in like the middle of the 70s. My work is a lot about hoping there's a better future, there's optimism, and there's a kind of a power that optimism, you know, makes us survive. Otherwise, there's no reason why we should actually keep going. And I think that power, that optimism, is very important today as well. I'm hoping that this is just another bad moment in our history that we are going through right now. But we have the tools to make it better. And so I hope that this new young generation is actually ready to learn from our past and maybe the history of climate protest and peace protest and, you know, kind of understanding that the world is connected and is a network, even more so than, you know, in the 1970s. We have a different life with digital technologies. We have completely different discoveries in material science, in communication tools. So I think there are better tools to improve what we experience right now. Maybe that's as a beginning of a story. So this is not a new situation. Like, I think there are waves of these kind of down moments, and we're just in another one, hopefully just another one.
Germany in particular has been seriously thinking about this issue for a much longer time compared to us. Even now, Germany is very involved in many issues, not only domestic issues, but also global issues. And we see many relevant policies as well. We'd like to go back to what Mr. Meyer said now, but who would you like to talk? Who would you like to be the next speaker? Professor Oh? Yes, I'd like to ask something to Mr. Meyer. I mentioned this briefly during my presentation. I've been working at the Graduate School of Smart City for about 10 years. Smart Park and Smart T were the things that I developed at the time and also now. Smart Tree and Smart Park has to be weaved into the lives of the citizens. That means it has to be accessible and easy to use as a technology. Then, the most important thing here would be technological standards. In Korea, even until 5 or 6 years ago, everything was smart this, smart that, and then suddenly it changed to AI. AI is everywhere. But bringing AI into the landscape and architecture is our challenge, except it's facing a lot of challenges. For example, system architecture and other things lack technological standards. IT people are unable to make that standard. People in landscape just engage in discourse, but they really don't have any practical tools. Do you have, Mr. Meyer, do you have such a thing in Germany, for example, how smart technologies and ecosystems are applied to green areas? Do you have any system or standards when doing this, since you've been doing for a longer time in Germany? May I ask Mr. Meyer to talk about this, especially in the context of Cheongdam Tower? You are actually conducting this experience in the Cheongdam Tower 5.0. Do you have any specific cases where technologies were applied in the Cheongdam Tower 5.0? How did you collect the vegetation? How did you find the right ones that fit our climate? How does it relate to the 4 seasons? And since it's a high-rise building, how does the height relate to the vegetation? I remember hearing about this, so I think that would be a great way for people to understand this issue. How does that sound?
I was kind of sandwiched between 2 Korean languages, but thank God there is the translation. Thanks for the translation. It's very helpful and great work. I think we all are facing, at the beginning of understanding what AI is doing for us, and independent from the vegetation question, it's a great tool on all levels, from design to efficiency to speed to compressions of information to expanding of information, that we still need to figure out where we use it and how we use it. And every day there are other apps and other systems of AI helping us or coming onto us. The question is how, if it's such a comfort tool, even more so than smart technology, how do we develop tools or knowledge to evaluate what is given to us? If I write a text and have Google translate it into Korean, I cannot check if it's correct Korean or not. I have to trust that there's a language that works. So in the end, you still need somebody who is embedded in the knowledge to evaluate what's going on. It might just be a further step for this kind of feedback or let's say the control mechanism. This might all get better, and maybe at some point we can trust, but I learned that trusting can be good and it's important, but you cannot be completely sure that this is what you were going to say or what you wanted to communicate across. So this is one side. Now to the Cheongdam Tower and the plans. We worked, of course, also with specialists, and I think when we developed this planting system and the ventilation ideas for the tower, this was last year, so before the AI wave actually came onto us. But of course, we can always kind of double check and let's say improve what we discovered and what we assumed. So we work with biologists, we work with Perrault engineers. It's not just in our office. We work with a whole set of information and knowledge and partners and people who bring in their intelligence into this project. Maybe I can do that in a more controlled way, or compresses that kind of search and this kind of knowledge. But in the end, it still needs, I think, to go back to the specialists and make sure that the evaluation of this information is actually true. So in terms of the height difference, we see a lot of renderings where there's, of course, trees from the ground floor all the way up to the to heights. And in many cases, it's more of an intention maybe than a reality. Also, the maintenance is something that needs to be discovered as well. And every city, every location has a different microclimate, a different, let's say, atmosphere, a different form of like rain and and temperature and orientation to the sun and the sun movements. That there's no general rule for everything. So you have to look very precisely onto every location. There's wind directions, there's like rain directions, there is rotation to the sun, there are periods of seasons. But what is important for us is that it's not just like a generic, let's put green on a house. If you want to put plants on a house, it has to be a quality of improvement for the people who live in there, but also a quality of improvement for the city around, for the microclimate that's creating in an urban context, especially when you have a lot of high-rise buildings. And I think one alone doesn't really do much, but once there's a forest of high-rise buildings that you have here in Korea and in Seoul, then I think it becomes really important that this is considered and becomes part of the construction material for these new living situations. So I think similar to what you see in forests and maybe more extreme in, let's say, Swiss Alps, where you have like really a kind of a limit where there are no trees anymore, then you have bushes, then you have grasses, then you have like different kinds of flowers. In the end, maybe you have like micro plants and mosses. There's also a difference in scale that goes usually with the height. And I think that's what we are trying to achieve. So there's also a change of leaves, of colors, of flowers that creates a certain animation where the building is not one stable appearance for the whole year, but it actually changes over its seasons.
Professor Kim AhYeon, I think, should summarize this part later. We need to invite nature inside the buildings. I think Professor Meng has something to say. I was very impressed by his presentation, and Van Berkel and Professor Meng both said the same thing. Intelligence and science and technology, we need to find a way to invite it into nature, and they both said, like a shadow, it will provide a supporting role. And if we use it like a tool, like a shadow, we may be able to create a synergy, and that's the way forward in the future. Professor Meng, what do you think of this? As Jürgen Maya said, nature has to be supported by science for the green areas to be able to continue to be sustained and continue to be multi-layered. When we want to create a multi-layered city, in order to invite nature in this multi-layered city, we all need this process. But I think, on the other hand, when we think about nature, as was mentioned by Professor Kim in her presentation, we have to avoid the green frosting that we saw on the green cake on her slide. We're not just getting a whiff of the scent of nature, but we really have to feel nature close to us. And I think we need to come up with something that is radical, and we have to focus our energies on trying to do this. Can we really create multi-layered nature inside the buildings? And we need to think about the load bearing, and we need to make it logical. We need to use a lot of energy. But how much energy do we need to use? And I think Thomas mentioned it in his presentation. We need buildings not just for people inside, but we need to make buildings for people who are outside. And we need to come up with a system that will enable us to do so. We need technology to bring nature inside the buildings, but we need to enable people to be able to use and enjoy this multi-layered nature in the buildings.
여러분하고 아마 조금 다른 각도로 들었을 수도 있을 것 같은데요. 김 교수님이 강조하신 거는 저는 자연을 조성해야 되는 게 아니라 자연이 들어올 수 있도록 초대를 해야 된다. 한데 역점을 두신 걸로 저는 이해했거든요.
So I understood it as inviting nature rather than trying to create nature. That's how I understood Professor Kim's presentation. We have to open the door for nature to come in, but now, until now, it's been closed. So what I understood was that you're saying we need to open the door for nature to come in. So I was actually waiting for my turn. Yes, that is correct. The public projects that we carry out have mostly focuses on creating things and building things. So we need to consider many realistic conditions like budget. That means a lot of time we need to look at ways to just wait for nature to come in rather than just creating nature artificially. Mr. Heatherwick talked about Bali Bali, but a lot of times we're still bound by the Bali Bali mentality. Seoul's trying to look into 100 years in the future. If we're going to take such a perspective, rather than providing a visual service in a Bali Bali way, we need to look further into the future, and we have to be able to wait. That's a fundamental change that we have to undergo. That has to be the basic starting point. So waiting for something to happen as well as providing something that immediately satisfies citizens, those two things have to go hand in hand. Shall I stop here or should I go on? Go ahead. The third part was about Humanience. So we talked about smart technologies and AI. Modernization was based on blind trust towards science and technology. In that respect, I think we're still living in the modern era. As science and technology develops, it's quite clear that everything will be hyper-connected and AI can resolve every issue. But that's not true. As I showed you earlier, even science is unable to assess exactly how many species exist on this earth because there are so many things in the ecosystem that we cannot understand with modern technology and science. At the same time, we need to be humble toward nature and science and technology. Otherwise, science and technology will dominate human beings.
Connecting the two is not as romantic as we think it is. Human science and technology is something that is developed very rapidly, and it has to move fast, science and technology. In contrast, nature takes time. For millions of years, nature develops and evolves in a very slow way. So connecting nature and science and technology is not an easy task. So, like nature patiently waits for us, we need to be patient vis-à-vis nature and give nature some time to generate and grow. I think that was the message of Professor Kim. Then will we make a more human city if we do that? Thomas, what do you think?
Well, it's interesting, I guess, tying a few of these strands together. Jürgen spoke about an era, how we can have eras that are optimistic and eras which are where the spirit and confidence that you can do things and idealism can flourish. And I like that this event is about 100 years from now, because if in the UK we are living with 100 years on, approximately, maybe 120, 130, from an era that endowed us with a lot of why you think, maybe, that London is good. And the things I love about London, I'm aware that I'm in debt to people who made those decisions 140, 150 years ago. And one of the biggest debts is the trees. And we had a session yesterday in the conference, the Emotional Cities Conference, which was called How to Be a Good Ancestor. And it's like, at this moment, we're all here. Is this actually about us? Or is this about us making some things that won't really benefit us? And it seemed, I always thought it was the most generous thing to plant trees that you will never see being magnificent. They'll be pretty pathetic for a lot of the life you live with them. But to give those to another generation is something really astonishing. And I think that something I'm very interested in is that in our industry of the construction industry, we say now, the modernist mindset has said to ourselves that we are now rational and that we follow function and that we need to be rigorous with our analysis and rigorous with what we think and do. And I'm finding that hypocrisy at the moment in that logic, that I'm finding an industry that says that we are rigorous, we are logical, we are rational, but actually refuses to be it. And when I say that, it's like it likes doing that by itself, to itself, with itself, but it's crazy to me that we have an industry as big as the oil and gas industry, which the finances involved in our industry are massive. The impact as the world increasingly urbanizes and more people are living in cities, the impact on millions of people's lives is so massive of what we build, and yet the industry I've experienced in the West hates the idea that we measure it. And so Abigail, who's in the second row here, has been leading the Humanize campaign. Humans not just about humans, it's a way to frame a logic, really, but about the lived experience and real impact on people of what we make, not how many architecture awards we win, but really what is that impact. And it seemed amazing to me that in the United Kingdom, for example, the campaign team that Abigail led was one of the first times we were measuring how do the public feel about the buildings that are made. And there are now some amazing scientists who, this is an old industry, and we have been modernizing so many ways, but only now we're starting to measure the health impact of buildings. And we can, not about your opinion, we can measure your stress levels in different environments. That is rational. And that is tools for us if we measure the impact on different kinds of environments, different kinds of materials, different kinds of spaces, different kinds of planting. And I found it really funny that our industry is angry. Like, how dare you measure? Suddenly, having said that the industry is all about logic, rationality, and rigorous process, suddenly the industry goes, no, we're an art. We're an art, and it's subjective. And if you think what I do isn't good, well, you're stupid. And it's like, hang on, you can't have it both ways. You are either rational, and emotion is a very important side of rationally designing good places. And so I think, and the funny thing is, I don't think the science is going to force us to do dead things. Actually, the science is going to say we need more artistic thinking. We need more experimentation. We need more fascination. And actually the reasons why some of the people who resist the analytical dimension, actually they will flourish when we do it more. So coming back to eras, I know in a way it's funny for us as the foreigners coming here, and we feel, well, certainly speaking for myself, I feel very honored and privileged to be allowed to come in and talk to you, and I feel like, in a way, I'm trying to use my outsiderness to be useful. And often, when you are inside something, you don't realize how good certain things are that you're doing. And I feel at this moment that you are in an era. Back to just as Jürgen was talking about the era he was brought up in the 1970s. I think that you're in an era where are you going to be like the Victorians gave us a legacy of amazing parks and green spaces and heathland and street trees and squares that now we thank them underneath for what they did, because they were, it was a wealthy time. There was economic progress and growth and development, and there were big wealthy organizations, but there was a culture that said you give back to society, and that it isn't just a meritocracy where if I'm doing really, really well, that's because I'm great. But say if I'm doing really well, it's because I've had lots of privileges, and if I can share those privileges, then we will all grow. And I feel that the economic miracle that's happened in Seoul in the last 30, 40 years, don't waste it. Be the era that I am now grateful that we had 130, 140 years from now. This is not existing in the United Kingdom like this at this moment. The level of confidence to even have this conversation, not feel threatened by it, but know that this is a moment. Don't waste it, and let your ancestors, your descendants, who we don't know who they are, be grateful for a conversation like this and the care of people all coming together and planting the trees and making moves that may be unsatisfying now, but just to think we did something good for the future I think we should be joyful at that.
사실
Yes, in fact, the most unselfish organism, it would be plants. It's the most unselfish life form. At the same time, the most selfish life form would be human beings. Nothing can replace us in that respect. How can we connect the two and establish a relationship? It's not just a question of speed, but it involves many other aspects. Professor Jahoon, would you like to touch upon this issue? How can selfish human beings learn from unselfish plants or become closer to plants? Do you have any wisdom on this?
Short tangent. I'm not going to go too long. But,
짧게 답하겠습니다.
I just read an article about the person that invented the infinite scroll. So if we look at any social media app or anything, we can keep on scrolling and there's no bottom. It's like a bottomless pit of information. It really is a pit, and it's not really information. Because we're not individuals, we're ad revenue. All we are ad revenue. We have to remember that. But so this inventor of the infinite scroll, he was very young. He thought, oh, what a great way to digest information. He resents, he's ashamed. He really is filled with loathe for what he invented. He didn't realize it was going to be deployed like this. So going back to a lot of the other conversations, including what Thomas Heatherwick was saying about we don't even talk to each other. I think there is, when we're actually not in the infinite scroll and we're in this room, we have actually signed an unspoken contract. Even the shape of this room, we're seated, we're looking at each other. There's a kind of unspoken contract that we're going to be here for an hour and a half, or actually 3 hours, is it? Thank you very much for staying for so long. So there's an unspoken contract that happens, and this contract completely gets destroyed and undermined with the infinite scroll. The infinite scroll is a metaphor of of technology in society and the way we are capitalized as ad revenue. So in that way, a plant is a contract as well. When we're in nature, when we're close to it, and sometimes we just observe it. We don't walk through it. We don't have to occupy it. Actually, what if nature just flowed past our window and it was a habitat that we're not allowed to go through, but we can watch it. When we see that biodiversity, that is a communicating contract. That means we have to be guardians. We have to actually respect and let this nature thrive. The more abstract nature comes, it's very interesting because abstract nature is like the infinite scroll. Abstract nature, like the American front lawn that you see in suburbs, it's just a monoculture of grass. All that is real estate money. It just marks your territory, and it's one culture, and maybe there's one or two bugs that live in it. All it is a kind of reified version of it. Really isn't nature. The more diverse, the more messy. Some areas that we can't go. There's thorns, brambles, there's smooth areas, rocks. Those kind of things are actually contracts. When we see it and we're close up to it, we actually have to interact with it, and we have to take care of it.
Professor Koo, you talked about co-housing in your presentation, and you pinpointed some of the dark sides of our apartment complexes. And co-housing makes us realize that it will be easier for us to create communities through these housing complexes. But you were saying in your presentation that communities were collapsing in these spaces, which is a paradox. So how can we revive the communities inside the city in this concept? I wanted to talk about nature when I grabbed the microphone. So let me talk about nature first. We had some good examples of architecture and nature can be integrated, but we are creating artificial nature when we do this, and it's hard to really maintain and manage. In the case of Korea, we have a long winter, long dry periods, and it's very expensive, although we have to do it. And putting nature inside the apartment complexes, yes, that's good, and we can do it, but we have to think our mindset first. We look at it from a user's perspective, and that's why there are problems. One other thing I would like to underline is that when Seoul talks about nature, they need to focus on the fact that Seoul is a blessed city. There is no other city that has a large river like the Han River that is more than 1 kilometer. We have small and big mountains that surround us. There is no other city like Seoul. And when foreigners come to Seoul, they like to go hiking because there are no cities where there's the city and the mountains living side by side. So when we talk about Seoul, we have to talk about the Han River and the mountains, and how are we going to perceive the mountains and the river and manage them. We had some answers here today, but how are we going to develop policies to do it? But we only looked at it from the user's point of view, not from a biological point of view, not from the ecological point of view. We need to allow nature to recover naturally, and that would be great for our mountains and our river. And I think looking forward 100 years, we need to consider that. And the citizens of Seoul, they don't know that our air quality is good when they breathe it. And in the same way, they don't really feel, or they're not really conscious that the river and the mountains are precious assets, but they need to do so in the future. How are we going to make our houses more community friendly. I worked as a project director in a project related with this, and it's not easy because we cannot reject the laws of the market. And we know that this is not good. I mean, if we make a building that is 50 stories high into a 70-story building, and if we change a FAR, what is the future generation going to do? There's not going to be demand in the future because our population is falling down. I think we are too selfish. We're living in the age of selfishness. I shouldn't talk about politics, but politicians are using this and manipulating this in a really weird way. They change and amend regulations, and we think that they're responding to the citizens' needs and demands, but nobody's talking about the future generations, about what is good for our future. And I think we need to start a public discussion on what is good for the future generation to be able to come out with a solution. And to find a solution, we have to perceive and realize that this is an issue. That would be the first start and the beginning.
Would any of the citizens or audience, I hope you don't understand, when Professor Koo said that Han River was 1 kilometer, he meant the width. The length of the Han River is actually 42 kilometers. But the length of Hangang within Seoul administrative district is 322 kilometers. And it accounts for 43.8% of the city land area. There is no such case in the world. In Europe, France has the highest green area ratio, which is 12.7% nationwide. It went down a little bit, and in 2010 it recovered to almost 30%. The whole of Europe applauded France for that, considering that Seoul is very lucky and blessed. It's a nature city in some respect. That makes it more important to establish a good relationship with nature. Hanyang city was built on nature, and it changed in many ways. It was occupying, it was violent, and then it was destructive. So a city that was born on nature evolved in a different way. What has happened to the city now? Right now, it has become a hostile city based on high-rise concrete buildings and apartment buildings. The solution, let me borrow the expression used by Professor Kim AhYeon. In the end, we have to go back to the harmonious relationship we had with nature in the beginning. That is where our future lies. However, nature is very patient. If we could be patient like nature, we could make it happen. But when it comes to human relationship, we need a change in our mindset. How do you think about that? What do you think is the way to reestablish human relationship? Now it has become like object to object. How can we restore the human relationship? What I said earlier might sound to be anti-technology. Yes, maybe in some ways, but like you said, I think technology is another way to overcome that challenge. The digital twin technology. might be just about high-rise buildings and mobility, but what we're actually doing in the environment is creating digital twins in the ecosystem. I actually looked at a demonstration. Let's say a river is polluted and we have green algae traveling parameters, and that means the fish will avoid the algae and move somewhere else. And this is taking place in a twin format. That means we need to understand nature better in order to change our attitude. But I believe that this requires a platform because we're unable to realize this. That we need to better understand nature, and we need data, a data system that allows us to understand it better and check the system within the context of urban planning, because until now only urban experts and architects were involved in urban planning until now.
Everybody is saying the same thing, whether it's nature, human, or technology. If we want everything to be integrated, what we want to say through next 100 years is to create a multi-layered city. And we created cities vertically, horizontally, and we created barriers, and we don't want to do that anymore. We want to create multi-layers in the future, and then new spaces will organically communicate with each other, and we will be able to network with each other. And in our next 100 years master plan, the lower levels will all be for communities. So each land will be owned by private owners, but lower levels will be created into communal spaces and spaces for the community. And on top of that, we will program individual needs. And if we do that, then a selfish human being will become more altruistic. What do you think about this? This was my proposal. Is that a difficult question? Let me answer. I think we are not just focused on one topic in our discussions. We are having a general discussion on everything at once. And so I'm not sure how I should answer this question, but I'd like to say two things. The first thing, Professor Kim said something that made sense to me. When I teach architecture to my students at the university, there's something I always tell them. I say, integrating with the environment, asking Nexus questions are not questions that we are asking just today. I think architects have been asking these questions forever, even in the past. So I tell my students, you will be able to solve questions that we have been unable to solve. And I tell them to go to Yangdong village, and there's buildings there that have been built by Shim Soo-jung, and Shim Soo-jung follows specific rules when they design their buildings. And the rule is they want to invite nature that is outside always in order to create a landscape inside the house. It's an empty space that is left in reserve for nature to come in. Whenever they work on office projects or housing projects, I tell my students that they should go to see Shim Soo-jung's architecture to try to reflect this philosophy. And as Professor John Hong said, maybe landscape should no longer be landscape as a contract, but something that adds on to architecture, something that can be invited at any time by the building. And maybe traditional architecture of Korea can become a reference. So when I teach design, this is what I tell my students. I was talking about technology in my presentation, and there's one thing that I would like to say. Smart Tree is one of my projects, and I study plants, and plants, like humans, are intelligent. We think that plants just grow, but no, a plant is smarter than a human. When they're hungry, they ask for water, and we have sensors on the plants, so we can measure that. We sequence it, and we analyze it, and we have our rhythm where we sleep and wake up, and the plant has the same circadian rhythm. They wake up at 5 a.m. in the morning, and in the afternoon, they go to sleep slowly, and so they have a biorhythm that is very similar to humans. And the smart tree is something that monitors this data, and we want to create a management manual. That was our first task. And the second task was to, based on the big data connected with AI, to see how we can translate the plant's biodata into human language. If they want water, then they will ask us in human language to water them, for example. And in my last research, I focused on trying to see if they could communicate and have a conversation with humans. And it's not completed yet, but in the middle of my research, I realized that if we want to love nature and if we want to become closer to nature, we have to understand them and we have to go closer to them. What is their biorhythm? What are they trying to tell us? We need to know that. And because we have technology today, AI and smart tools, we are able to do that today. What is the difference between smart and AI was a question we received. What I did was Smart 2.0. With the data, I connected with the app, and the plant told us that they needed water. But if we connected with AI, the AI judges and decides and sends the water to the plant. We don't need human intervention. And one thing that I showed you in one of my slides was a plant that just grows. It's an AI plant that grows on its own, and it was taken in a picture with a drone. So through my research, what I have learned is we didn't know the biorhythm of a plant or what they were thinking before, but thanks to smart technology, now we can communicate with the plants scientifically, we can understand them, and so now we can communicate and have a conversation with the plants based on technology, and we can specifically create different models for that. And I think that human and nature and their relationship can become more intimate thanks to this technology.
So now I think we can talk more freely without any set boundaries. Actually, we're not trying to do something completely different in the future, something that never existed before. We're looking at the cities and buildings that our ancestors built, and those cities and buildings already embed our future. We have the pavilions in front of villages. Once you go into the village, there is a common ground where the community get together and engage in communication. When you go into the into the quarters of the house, the outer quarters of the house, there's another space for gentlemen to engage in conversation. Everything was organic, but this sort of organization has all broken down. So we're not trying to return to the past. We're trying to take the wisdom from the past and look at ways to reproduce it in the future. I think that's the biggest task lying ahead of us. The intelligent city that we're talking about is probably a tool that will enable us to carry out this task. And as Mr. Perrault said, which was very interesting, was that creating a system so that it can be a very good tool for building a city in the future. And you presented a specific case or example of that. Mr. Perrault is actually implementing this in his underground city. So bringing that from underground to above ground and then to the air is probably an organic flow that will complete our future. We have about 20 minutes left, and I think we can have a free conversation. I won't designate any speaker. You're free to speak. Since you have the microphone, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, he won't designate a speaker, but he's pointing at me. I've got to speak. I was just thinking about talking as a designer of places and buildings. One of the, in a way, maybe one of the most important lessons I've learned, and you reminded me of it when you were talking about layers. And it's, for me, that I think as an industry, we need to acknowledge one of the biggest challenges we have in creating cities. And that challenge is a dynamics one, which is how big we are, how high we are, how wide apart our eyes are, how long a step is, so how long it takes to walk, how long it takes to cycle. And we are still roughly the same size 50,000 years ago. Maybe your ancestor was a little bit shorter and didn't eat, maybe they were taller and ate more meat. I don't know. But we are not much different than thousands of years ago. And there was a size of the world and the buildings we built. But now, to make economic sense, a property developer, it's not worth doing a building. I mean, in the past, a building might be 8 meters wide, maybe 10 meters wide. A big building might be 15 meters or 20 meters wide. Now, we have buildings that are 400 meters wide, 600 meters. We are working on projects of this scale. But we're still the same size. And it's like our bottoms got bigger and bigger and bigger. And so we've ended up with these big bum buildings. And the challenge is that if we go back to layers, is we still think in this way. And so often in our industry, we think about the tower and then we end up with big layers like this. But our heads move more easily this way than up and down. And when we have been speaking to the public and you ask people what they remember, what's in their zone of perception, we're not flying in drones in the air, we're on the ground. And so that means we actually, the real biggest experience is the first 2 floors. So that's only the first 8 meters, 10 meters of the world around us. You feel the other bit. And so I'm finding that we are not sensitive enough to that. We worry too much about the tower, and we don't worry and understand the human experience of the street. And in the United Kingdom, when people talk about bad new development, they go, oh, it's very bad. They often are saying because of towers. And so there is a perception that the towers are very bad because it makes places soulless. But I learnt actually in Hong Kong, which has some mountains and has some water, but it has these chopstick towers where you can walk along an older district, but there are towers there are 30-story towers, but the layers are not this way, the layers are this way. And so you're not bored. Your eye, there is the visual complexity, if we talk sort of analytically, there's the diversity and visual complexity that comforts us and gives us a level of fascination just because you're getting change and transformation as you walk this way, or whether you cycle. And those are the streets you go slower in. When you get a monotonous experience of just glass, one architect, one designer has decided it's all going to be glass, or all going to be green, or all going to be brick. However genius that designer is, however clever their design, if it's a big bummed building, too much of any one thing, it just becomes, it doesn't have the necessary visual complexity that nourishes our brain. So I would love to think ahead that Seoul is the city which understands the problem of bigness. And that's not just the problem of bigness in building bums. Often it's the size of spaces. Some of the best spaces I've ever been to are small. And you compress, you squeeze through. And logically, if you speak to a good master planner, they'll say this is too narrow. But actually, it's that feeling of energy you get when you're pushed close. I remember going to a hotel in Beirut, and I was working on different hotel projects, and every hotel had higher ceilings and bigger elevators, and the bigger and the higher and more 6-star, no 7-star, no 8-star, whatever stars they invented. And bigness felt like luxury. And I walked into this hotel, and the ceiling was really low, and my brain went, wrong. And then we went into the elevator, and it was really close, and I thought, wrong, wrong. And then I was in the elevator, and then I suddenly realized and remembered that in elevators, normally in a hotel, you go in, and the elevator is big enough, and maybe I'm just a British person, but I would just go in, press the button, and you might come in and press the button, we kind of go up, and you might go by like this. In a small elevator, you go in, like the personal space, you have to smile at the person, and you're more likely to have a conversation because it's small. And my strange, warped British politeness, you get over it because actually your intimacy is encouraged. And actually I'm dying to talk to the neighbor in the elevator, and they might be to me, but it's sort of the chemistry of space not being always big. Sometimes it's great to be big. Sometimes it's great to have a big building. But in general, we need, I think, a mindset of small because we are small and we haven't changed. And I don't know what, I'm trying to think of a good, clever name of a policy to try to persuade you to do. The small policy, that's not a good name, is it? But something small bum, then everyone will remember. But what's a thing that could this be the city that understood the problem of bigness, which actually around the world, we don't, and we still think we're doing good things. And the picture of the building, you think, oh, the picture's cool, makes a great postcard. And I'm sure many of us have done this. You then go along and you walk around it, and your emotion is just like dead because they didn't put the love where most people are, which is outside on the ground where the really sustainable, beloved buildings of our city. And if I go around London, the legacy of the Victorian or Georgian older buildings, they have lots of complexity and visual fascination. You don't get one endless, repetitive, monotonous thing. And and if it is big, they know they need to work harder. So if we're going to be big, no problem, but you need to work harder and know that your job is to give a necessary complexity and fascination at the same time. Thank you.
감사합니다.
Thank you. Meyer?
9 minutes left, that's great. Thank you. I think what you're hitting at is actually a question of monotony and boredom somehow, which becomes uncomfortable. But I think the question of scale is something that's also very culturally different. So I don't think there's like a general rule or recipe, where small is good and big is like bad, or the other way around. What I learned when I went to study in the States, that when you go into an elevator, people talk to you because they want to feel if you're an enemy or not. That's kind of the cultural background. In Germany, you go to an elevator, you turn around, and you turn the back to the other person. You don't talk. You don't ignore the other person. So it's a different way of comfort level, and also how you're trained. Where you find the fear, or where you find the comfort with another person. So I don't. Your considerations on scale, I think I totally agree, and Richard Sennett, I live on a street which is called Kantstraße in Berlin, related to the philosopher, and he referred to that street as his ideal street in terms of scale for pedestrians. It's small shops, owned by people, younger, older, like some of them are coming from from a tradition of generations of family, and it's kind of the diversity and let's say the diversity and the stimulants that comes with but being kind of confronted with different input and different products, that are offered to you, different services, different affordances. Yeah, maybe affordance is the right word. Different attractions where you feel like this is for me, maybe this is not for me. So you kind of make decisions on the go, like intentionally or unintentionally, or consciously or unconsciously. And I think that's what we are looking for. But I think we jumped over the IT question, the smart city question, with looking at the architecture of, let's say, style difference and repetition. And I think the scrolling down is kind of the monotony that's kind of created by having too much difference, right? At some point you cannot evaluate anymore, what is important for you and what is not important. So that's when overstimulance becomes, again, a boredom condition. Like emptiness or like too much, you have to find the right balance in between. And I think that only makes sense if smart city, or let's say intelligent tools, digital culture, works within a society that's not an authoritarian culture, where you feel that there's a certain control of what the information is, how the information is handled, and there's a certain privacy and protection of your personal space also considered within the new technologies.
We're approaching the end of this forum, but if there's a burning question or issue that you want to talk about, go ahead. Professor Meng, shall we start with you? Mr. Heatherwick talked about the urban space and the layers. I fully understand what you are saying. I think in Seoul, citizens instinctively like places that are shaped in this manner, and those things should be preserved in this respect. However, these sort of assumptions are threatened because of the reconstruction and rebuild process. So I think trying to keep this in place is a challenge for us, especially in the urban space and where people are walking around. It's very important. However, the level of pedestrians is not just above ground like it used to be. It could be in the future underground, like Mr. Dominique Perrault talked about, or if UAM develops further, it could become the aerial space. So there are different levels for pedestrians, possibly. As I listened to you, I thought about yesterday's forum. It was very interesting. And a professor from Berkeley talked about AI and said that it should be ancestors' intelligence rather than artificial intelligence. That was engraved in my mind. When we talk about technology, we only talk about technology at this point, at the presence. And I think that a lot of times it's a continuation of existing technologies, not something totally new. That sort of mindset might be necessary when we think about technology as a city.
또 마지막으로
Any last comments? Anyone? I'm not going to force you.
저는 오늘 두 가지 말씀드리고 싶어요.
I'd like to say two things. One is when we talked about the importance of being small, small, big, vertical, horizontal. There is always a conflict between the two, but both are needed. When we talk about a multi-layered city for Seoul in 100 years, we need to design taking into account the advantages of the vertical and the horizontal. And maybe the advantages of the vertical can be used when we build vertically. Are we just going to go small? No. Small is beautiful, I think is what Thomas was trying to say. Small is beautiful, small is ethical, and small is moral. Is maybe the message that we're trying to say. In September, August 2023, I went to Europe, I went to Venice, and I went to Padova, going to Milano. And Padova is where our first plant was discovered. It's the city of Galileo. And when I went to Padova, the galleries were designed in a corridor, and it's a very old corridor. And it was in August, and if there was no corridor, we would have had no shelter to hide from the sun. But they provided shade, and we saw shops in the corridor, and there were chairs there. People were able to rest and entertain there. Small is beautiful, but small is very ethical at the same time, is what I think. And Soseon, a small garden in Korea, does that. Gardens in Korea compared to China are very small in size. But inside our small garden, we have provided all the advantages of things that can be provided on a small scale, like Padova. So maximum in minimum is how I would like to express it. Small is ethical, small is beautiful, like the small gardens in Korea. And in our Next 100 project, maybe we need to take this into consideration. And I think that we will be able to create a fantastic Seoul in the future. We have 45 seconds left. Shall we end?
사실
Our future is not talking about mega cities and super high-rise building or mega budget projects. Maybe we can just focus on one word. If we could focus on one word, it would probably be a city that's more humane, just like Mr. Heatherwick mentioned. It's a city that we can experience with our eyes. And within that space, the city should be more humane, which is probably the right answer for the future. I think everybody had that in common when they talked. Within that city, there's a human community. Within that city, there are intelligences created by science and technology. That's where our future lies. I'd like to say one final thing. Today, we, at the present day, live in a time when we can assess the size through screens. That means we can see eye to eye with someone who is several thousand kilometers away from us. But actually, What about people who are close to us, where we can, at a point where we can see with our eye? People say that we don't look at people who are more than 12 meters away from us. And when you're standing next to a person, and if you want to see the color of his eye, you shouldn't be more than 1.2 meters away. We should be closer, physically closer. I think that in the future, people should be looking at each other face to face at a close distance, see eye to eye, and whether we are able to create a space that enables this closeness will determine the value of cities in the future. I believe that's what we learned today from all of our partners, and Seoul City will do its best to create such a city in the future. Thank you very much.
네, 여러분 큰 박수 부탁드립니다.
Yes, everyone, let's give our speakers a warm round of applause. Now we are about to close our forum, but there is another group photo that will be taken, so please stay on the stage and we will take a quick picture.
네, 자리에 앉아서 한 컷 진행하겠습니다.
We will take a picture with everyone sitting first.
네, 그리고 무대 중앙에서도 한 번 더
We'll take another picture with everyone standing in front of the stage.
네, 사진 촬영 진행하겠습니다.
We'll take the picture now.
네, 그리고 오늘 굉장히 좋은 자리니까요. 파이팅! 다 같이 한번.
Let's take a picture saying fighting. Okay, or the future of Seoul.
서울의 미래.
Future of Seoul. Fighting.
네, 감사합니다.
Thank you.
이상으로 넥서스 서울 넥스트 백.
We will now end our Partners Forum, Nexus Seoul, Next100. Please return your receivers before you leave. Thank you everyone for staying with us until the end.
여러분, 덧붙여서 오늘
In addition,
시청자 중 굿즈 수령 대상자 문자를 받으신 분들은 데스크에서 수령을 해
some of you will be able to get some
제출해 주신 분들도 행사 종료 후에 안내 데스크에서 준비된 선물을 받아 가시기 바랍니다. 네, 여러분 오늘 오랜 시간 동안 고생 많으셨습니다. 이상으로 오늘 포럼을 모두 마치도록 하겠습니다. 모두 조심히 돌아가십시오.